Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case, the case of Cassie Jo Stoddart. We will explore the tragic story of Cassie Jo Stoddart, a high school senior from Pocatello, Idaho, whose murder was influenced by the movie, Scream. Let's go back to 2006, when the Scream franchise was at its peak. Even though the first film was released in 1996, long before Cassie's murder, Cassie was an honor student at her high school in Pocatello. She attended classes with her boyfriend, Matt Beckham, and her friends, Brian Draper and Tori Adamczyk, and they often spent their free time together. Cassie was a beautiful young girl with long flowing dark hair, embodying both beauty and intelligence. In a 2016 interview with Idaho Magazine, Cassie's brother Andrew Stoddart described her as artistic, with a passion for drawing and music. She was a great role model and a typical girl. Cassie's classmates and friends, Brian and Tori, were very interested in the horror movie Scream and other similar films. They also enjoyed making their own videos, with Brian often filming Cassie. Eventually, Brian and Tori began recording discussions about murders. In one recording, Brian said, "We've already found a victim, and maybe it's our girl. You know, we need a sacrifice, and we have to go for it. She will be the first on the list. She'll be all alone in a big dark house." This particular video was filmed on September 2, 2006, and the audio was later found on a videotape that was given to the police, along with other evidence for the murder case. Brian's lawyer argued that this tape should be disregarded since the friends were merely creating a horror film. That night, Cassie was supposed to stay home to care for her aunt and uncle's pets while they were away on business. She invited her boyfriend Matt over to watch movies and keep her company to avoid feeling bored and lonely. Cassie's mother had prohibited her from bringing guests over, but she still told Matt to come. Later on, Brian and Tori showed up, even though she hadn't invited them. They all chatted together and took her uncle's dogs for a walk to keep them calm. To minimize noise, Cassie eventually locked the dogs in a room, and the boys started goofing around. At one point, Brian and Tori decided to leave the house where Matt and Cassie were and go to the movie theater instead of watching Kill Bill 2. According to court records from the 6th Judicial District Court of Idaho, they got into Tori's red car and drove away. They stopped alongside the road to park, then got out to change into dark pants, shirts, gloves, and white masks. Both of them also grabbed large knives. Afterward, they drove back and parked near the house again. Dressed in their costumes and armed with knives, they walked down the driveway toward the house. To enter, they broke a basement window. Once inside, Brian and Tori began making noise by stomping and banging, trying to lure Cassie and Matt downstairs to scare them. They created chaos by throwing objects and breaking things. Then, they found the circuit box and switched off the lights in the house. After some time, they turned the lights back on, but Cassie and Matt still did not come downstairs. Meanwhile, they heard that Matt's mother had arrived to take him home. At 10:30 p.m., Matt started to feel uneasy, claiming that something strange was happening with the lights in the house. His mother suggested that Cassie spend the night at their place, but Cassie declined, saying she needed to take the dogs out early. Matt left with his mother, leaving Cassie alone. Once he was gone, the guys turned off the electricity again and went back upstairs. At the top of the stairs, Brian opened a closet door to make noise and scare Cassie. Meanwhile, the dogs were growling behind a door in the room as Brian and Tori entered the living room, where Cassie was lying on the couch. When she saw them, she jumped up and asked who they were. Tori moved in front of Brian and approached Cassie, who shouted that she wasn't scared of them and could handle them herself. Brian heard Cassie's screams and saw Tori raise a knife and attack her multiple times. She collapsed to the floor, making a gurgling sound. Tori turned to Brian and said, "I know what I did. We have to kill her." He then stabbed Cassie several more times. "I just killed Cassie. This isn't a joke. I stabbed her in the throat and I watched her lifeless body fall. I killed her." It all felt surreal to Brian. but everything happened so quickly. "We need to act fast," he said to Tori as they were in the car. Tori and Brian were celebrating, shouting, "We did it! It was so easy." The group in Tori's car visited his house, but didn't stay long. They first entered the garage, where they took blue garbage bags. After removing their costumes, they packed the costumes and knives into the bags and changed into pre-prepared street clothes. They also grabbed a bottle of liquid and placed everything in the back seat of Tori's car before leaving the garage. On their way, they bought matches and drove to Black Rock Canyon. There, they went down a trail to try to burn the bag containing the costumes and knives. However, the liquid wasn't very flammable, so the items wouldn't catch fire. As a result, Tori and Brian dug a hole and buried everything, covering it with branches. Afterward, they drove around the area for a while before returning to Tori's house to watch a movie. Cassie's aunt and uncle, Allison and Frank Contreras, returned on September 24. When she hadn't heard from her daughter at the expected time and hadn't received a call, Cassie's mother went to their house soon after. Frank, Cassie's uncle, came out to meet her mother and wouldn't let her inside because Cassie's body had been found on the living room floor, with dried blood around it. The police were called and they advised not to touch anything. When the officers arrived, they took the body for examination and began their investigation. They discovered that the intruders had broken a window to enter through the basement, which was in disarray, and the electrical panel was open, raising further questions. There were 2 Dobermans locked in separate rooms. If they had been nearby, they would have prevented anyone from getting close to the girl. This raises the question of why Cassie locked them up, as a stranger would not have been able to do so. The autopsy showed that Cassie died from multiple stab wounds, 26 in total, with at least 9 being fatal. These wounds impacted her heart, lungs, and liver, leaving her with no chance of survival. It was determined that 2 different knives were used in the attack, suggesting the involvement of 2 assailants. There was no evidence of abuse assault, and her death occurred overnight between September 22 and 23. The first person questioned was Cassie's boyfriend, Matt. He explained that on the evening of September 22, he was at Cassie's house when Brian and Tori arrived. However, after an hour, they grew bored and left. On September 23, Matt attempted to contact Cassie by phone, but received no response. He was unable to visit her house to check on her because he lacked transportation. His family had only 1 car, which his mother took to work. Matt found out about Cassie's murder on Sunday, September 24, when Cassie's mother called him to ask what he had done with her daughter. Matt thought that Brian and Tori treated Cassie well and might have even had feelings for her, as they sometimes flirted. During a detailed interrogation with Tori on September 24 at his home, where his parents were present, Tori stated that he and Brian had gone to a party with Cassie and Matt. However, since no one else showed up, they decided to leave her and Matt alone, and they went to the movie. When asked for more details, Tori could not recall any specifics about the movie they claimed to have watched, only mentioning that after the movie, he and Brian returned home. The following day, the police interviewed Brian with his mother present. Brian's version of events that evening closely matched Tori's. They left Cassie to go to the cinema, but like Tori, Brian couldn't recall the plot of the movie they supposedly watched 2 days earlier. He expressed distress upon hearing about Cassie's death and had trouble accepting that she was gone. When officers spoke with the cinema attendant, she confirmed that neither Tori nor Brian had actually been to the movie, as she recognized them and would have remembered their presence. This prompted the police to take a closer look at the friends. On September 25, the detective interviewed an anonymous individual at a high school, which revealed the following information. Tori and Brian had a strong fascination with knives, guns, and horror movies. They were so passionate about these films that they even wrote a screenplay centered around a murder. The witness reported that Cassie had asked her friends to film her for this project, and about 2 months prior, Tori had allowed Cassie to read the script. Tori expressed his enjoyment of movies like Scream and Friday the 13th, and he owned a collection of knives stored in his bedroom closet. Additionally, he had created a glove similar to the one seen in A Nightmare on Elm Street. The witness also noted that Tori bragged about being capable of committing the perfect crime, attributing this confidence to his extensive viewing of murder films and his habit of taking notes on evading capture. At school, Tori would often joke around by pretending to hit others and simulating throat-cutting gestures. On September 22, 2006, Tori had invited this witness to Cassie's party, but she declined. Furthermore, the police found out that Tori had been in love with Cassie for the past 2 to 3 years. On September 27, 2006, Brian and Tori were arrested and charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Although they were minors at the time, they were charged as adults. During the interrogation, Tori broke down in tears and confessed that Brian was responsible for the crime. In response, Brian accused Tori, claiming Brian was present at the scene but did not take part. He insisted that their intention was only to scare Cassie, not to kill her. However, Brian later admitted that he had struck Cassie at Tori's command. He also led investigators to the locations where they burned their costumes and buried the unburned items. The police excavated the area and discovered 2 masks, clothing, shoes, and knives. Tori and Brian had removed their socks and buried everything since the clothing and shoes were covered in blood. They had planned to change outfits beforehand. Most notably, the police found a videotape at the bottom of the pit that provided undeniable evidence of the crime. The 40-minute recording showed Tori and Brian painting masks they had bought from a store. Later in the video, they recorded a message to future serial killers, wishing them success and discussing their plans to target Cassie and her boyfriend, Matt. Fortunately, Matt's mother insisted he go home that day, which ultimately saved him. The tape also featured an interview that Tori conducted with Cassie and Matt on the afternoon of September 22, during which he indicated on screen that the two would soon be killed. Additionally, during a search of Tori's house, the police found a red notebook containing notes about planning a murder, as well as a list of 20 people that Brian and Tori intended to kill over the next 2 years, targeting one person each month. As investigators looked into the individuals on the list, they discovered that it included teachers, friends, girlfriends, and even a relative. The police were startled to uncover the connections these potential victims had with Tori and Brian, as most of these relationships appeared normal. Many people were shocked to learn that they were being targeted for murder. It's important to note that Tori and Brian did not fit the mold of typical victims of bullying or abuse. They seemed perfectly normal. Brian Draper was found guilty on April 17, 2007, and Tori Adamczyk was found guilty on June 8, 2007. On August 21, 2007, both received mandatory life sentences without the possibility of parole for first-degree murder, and an additional 30 years for conspiracy to commit murder. They began serving their sentences in a correctional facility in Idaho. The verdict upset the families of both Tori and Brian, who had hoped for leniency due to their young ages. Tori's relatives were especially outraged. In 2010, the attorneys for Brian and Tori filed separate appeals to the state Supreme Court, but both were denied. Tori's family continued to seek changes to his sentence for over a decade. Ultimately, in 2017, Tori Adamczyk lost the final court case that could have affected his sentence, ensuring that both Tori and Brian would spend the rest of their lives in prison. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Leslie Reeves. On November 20, 2021, Leslie Reeves and Chris Smith met at a bar where Chris was performing as the lead singer of a band. After their initial meeting, Chris invited Leslie back to the bar for a friendly get-together. What started as a casual dinner quickly turned into something more, as they both felt a strong attraction to each other. They met again on November 24, 2021, just before Thanksgiving, at their favorite bar. The bar was packed, but they had made reservations. Those who were there that night remembered Chris and Leslie as a fun couple, full of laughter and conversation, with no signs of conflict between them. Leslie and Chris then got ready and went to his house. Leslie felt comfortable being alone with Chris, as he had made a positive impression on her. Additionally, Leslie was very good at defending herself, which made her feel safer when visiting him. Chris lived on a farm 100 kilometers away from the bar in Farmer City, Illinois, USA. At around 10 p.m., Leslie sent her friend Nanette Stuber a text message saying that something was wrong, but she did not provide any further details. Coincidentally, Nanette was asleep at the time and did not read the message until the next morning. This turned out to be the last message sent by Leslie Reeves. When Nanette woke up, she was eager to talk to Leslie about her date with Chris. Instead, she was alarmed to see Leslie's disturbing message. Nanette texted back asking what had happened, but Leslie did not respond and ignored all attempts to contact her. This lack of communication made Leslie's friend even more worried. Fortunately, Leslie had shared Chris's address, so Nanette decided to go there to check on her. She headed toward Farmer City while also calling the police. Knowing that the trip would take over an hour, she planned to request a welfare check on Leslie. As Nanette approached the farm, she saw another car parked nearby. It belonged to Chris's friend, who had been trying to contact the band's lead singer and wanted to check on him. They decided to explore the area around the house and look inside. As they approached from behind, they noticed that the door was broken and there was a shattered window. Looking inside, they saw a foot on the floor. Chris's friend quickly ran to his car, grabbed his phone, and called emergency services to report a dead body in the house. When the police arrived, they discovered even more heartbreaking scenes. Chris was the first to be brought out. He was alive but severely injured, covered in blood and struggling to breathe. Doctors feared he might not survive the trip to the hospital. The second victim, a woman who had accompanied him from the bar, was taken out. Chris was a local celebrity, the lead singer of a band. Forensic investigators and the sheriff began their work at the farm, while Nanette waited outside in her car. Confused and anxious, she tried to figure out what had happened to her friend, but no one would provide information about Leslie. Overcome with anxiety, Nanette went to the police to share vital information. She explained that the night before Thanksgiving, Leslie had gone on a date with a man named Chris, the first person to be taken from the house. When the police asked to see a photo of her friend, Nanette showed them the pictures on her phone. Then the police delivered the heartbreaking news Leslie had been shot and was dead. However, Chris was still alive but in critical condition and was rushed to the medical center for surgery. Although his condition had stabilized slightly, it was still serious. Police conducted a thorough search of the crime scene, Chris's car, and his personal belongings. They focused particularly on the communication equipment in the home. The scene revealed numerous damaged items, including a broken back door, shattered windows, and a displaced refrigerator. An overturned table and scattered chairs indicated a struggle. Initially, police believed that Chris had attacked Leslie in his own home, leading to a fight that left both of them injured. Leslie died almost instantly, making Chris a suspect. However, further investigation revealed that no weapon was found at the crime scene, which raised suspicions. It appeared that the attacker had been armed. The police concluded that Chris was unlikely to be the attacker, as neither Leslie nor Chris had weapons. Additional findings confirmed that Chris did not attack Leslie. A burned pizza was found, indicating that the couple had planned to cook and eat dinner together that evening before the attack. Evidence suggested that the attacker had come to their home, and that they had attempted to defend themselves. Chris was shot first while Leslie fought back. The chaos around her suggested a struggle. She had been shot once in the head, resulting in her death. Police discovered 2 silver bullet casings from a Ninem handgun, one in the kitchen near Chris's body and one in the living room next to Leslie's. To piece together what had happened, police began investigating Leslie and Chris's backgrounds. Chris Smith was a friendly 48-year-old man who had been divorced less than a year before the shooting. Chris worked in pool construction and also played music with his band. He was known in the community as a kind and dedicated person who devoted himself to singing. Almost everyone recognized him by name and face. He had no legal problems, no history of violence, drug use, or involvement in criminal activity. Leslie believed Chris would be the ideal partner for family life. At the time, Chris lived in a large house in a nearby town with his mother and sister. They described him as a workaholic, spending all of his free time focused on his career. The family was close and deeply saddened by what happened to Chris. They had a dog named Tiki, who doctors said played a key role in Chris's survival that night. During the 12 hours Chris bled out before he was discovered, Tiki lay on top of him, keeping him warm. Experts believe the dog sensed Chris's distress and helped him through the situation. Leslie Reeves, a 40-year-old mother of 2, lived about an hour south of Farmersville. She was divorced and had a master's degree in engineering. However, she chose a different path and became a Pilates and women's self-defense instructor. Leslie was very active and used her social media channels to promote her work. When the police asked about potential suspects in Leslie's attack, Nanette provided the most valuable information. Nanette knew Leslie well and recalled that one person who had acted inappropriately was her ex-boyfriend, Robert Tarr. Leslie had ended their relationship long before the attack, but Robert responded by stalking her. He became so persistent that she was forced to block him from her emails, text messages, and phone calls. Although Leslie tried to cut off contact, Robert refused to accept her decision. News of the crime spread throughout the area, eventually reaching a close friend of Leslie's who lived near the city. She confirmed what she had heard and identified Robert Tarr as the only person capable of carrying out such an attack. Leslie's close friend quickly contacted the police to report him, and suspicions against Robert continued to grow. Meanwhile, Chris remained in the hospital. X-rays showed that a bullet had entered his brain between the 2 hemispheres. If it had traveled just 2 mm deeper, he would have died. When his family learned of the incident, his mother and sisters rushed to the medical center to assist him. The trip took 2 hours, during which they were very worried about him. Chris's relationship with Leslie was short-lived and somewhat unexpected, so most of his relatives were unaware of it. While the doctors worked hard, they had to remove part of Chris's skull to access the soft tissues, remove some of the bone fragments that had penetrated his brain, and extract the bullet. It was time to meet Robert Tarr, a divorced father of 3 living in Collinsville. Thanks to Nanette, they were able to contact him and arrange a meeting. From the beginning, Robert did not question why the police were interested in him and agreed to come to the station without a lawyer. Although the deceased's best friend, Leslie, reported that she had broken up with Robert, he insisted that they were still together, although he admitted that their relationship had problems. Robert denied any involvement in the crime, stating that he had never been to Farmersville and did not know Chris Smith. When questioned about his alibi, he recounted his activities the day before Thanksgiving, claiming that he spent most of the day with a friend until 6:30 p.m., after which he returned home and met only his daughter. However, his alibi was not convincing. There were many holes in his story, and no one could confirm his whereabouts at certain times, making it seem as if he was trying to hide something. The shooting occurred at 1 a.m., while Robert insisted that he had been home long before. Robert's daughter, who was brought to the police station and partially supported his account, said that he had come home around 6:30 p.m., left, and returned around 9 p.m. Robert appeared very upset during questioning. He cried and said that he missed Leslie. His daughter was confused about the situation. The police believed he left to follow Leslie and saw her with a new man named Chris, He stayed with his daughter until she went to bed around 10 p.m. However, at around 2:45 a.m., Robert's daughter woke up to noises in the house. Robert was frantically doing laundry and kept saying he couldn't sleep, which raised suspicions. Robert's daughter also mentioned that her father owned a gun. While the two were at the police station, officers searched their home and discovered a gun. When they showed it to Robert's daughter, she realized that her father had used another gun just the day before. The police checked Robert's movements to verify his alibi. They found that he had filled up his gas tank at a gas station near Farmer about 15 to 20 minutes before the murder, and they obtained a receipt as evidence. Robert was caught on surveillance cameras at various locations as he traveled to the city. This evidence contradicted Robert's earlier claims that he had never heard of Farmersville and had never been there. He was eventually arrested after being caught lying, which allowed the police to detain him and prevent him from fleeing. Chris's family was relieved, as they feared the criminal might return to harm the survivor. Just a day after the arrest, more circumstantial evidence against Robert continued to emerge, and the police believed they had the right man. Robert's lawyer quickly appeared on television to discuss the case, asserting his client's innocence. Robert's story changed rapidly. He claimed that at 6:40 p.m., Leslie called him out of the blue, asking for a ride to a friend's house in Farmersville. He said he arrived at 7:30 p.m., dropped Leslie off near Chris's house, and then returned home. He explained his earlier lies by saying that he was afraid of attracting police attention. Robert claimed that he had simply picked up Leslie and left, insisting that he had not shot anyone. However, the timeline did not match his daughter's account. He stated that there was tension between his daughter and Leslie, so he did not want to worry her any further. In contrast, Robert's daughter described Leslie as a kind woman, and they quickly formed a close bond. Meanwhile, Robert's web of lies continued to grow. He attempted to challenge the police's theories while speaking to reporters, arguing that the police had found no glass or blood in the car he was driving, nor was there any other evidence linking him to the murders. Additionally, no DNA samples from the victims were found at the crime scene or in his car. Robert's defense attorneys used these points to support their case. The police desperately needed physical evidence. Ideally, a pistol containing the bullets used in the crime to conduct ballistics testing. Unfortunately, their initial search was unsuccessful. However, a few days later, Robert's daughter contacted the police, stating that she had found the gun he used in the attack. The weapon was safely stored in a thick Ziploc bag and hidden in the yard, possibly to prevent rain damage, suggesting that the perpetrator intended to use it again. The bag contained numerous fingerprints belonging to Robert, making the discovery significant to the investigation. Despite this evidence, Robert maintained his innocence and attempted to manipulate the facts. Although there were numerous fingerprints on the Ziploc bag, there were none on the gun itself, indicating that Robert had attempted to clean it. However, he was not clever enough to dispose of it. Further analysis revealed that he had not cleaned the gun properly, as tiny drops of Leslie's blood were found on it. To justify himself, Robert began telling a story that the gun actually belonged to Leslie, and that she had asked him to hide it. He claimed that Leslie had learned how to use a gun. However, her shooting instructor, a friend of Leslie's, refuted Robert's story, stating that he had never seen the weapon with her. Leslie's friend insisted that Leslie did not carry a gun for self-defense on that date. If she had had a gun with her, the attacker would not have been able to leave alive. She would have been able to defend herself. Despite everything, Robert maintains his innocence. The outcome depends on the survivor's memory. Chris Smith, the prosecution's main witness, survived the brutal attack but remains in a drug-induced coma. Doctors report some positive progress, but it is too early to make any predictions about his recovery. While waiting for Chris to regain consciousness, Robert's cellmate approached the police with a disturbing confession. He revealed that Robert tried to hire him as a hitman to kill Chris Smith and the chief prosecutor for $110,000, even paying $10,000 up front. In response, security at the hospital was increased. Investigations were conducted thoroughly, but no evidence supporting the attack was discovered. Robert claims that he never considered hiring a hitman. He stated that he gave $10,000, but it was to bail out a friend. However, this raises the question of why Robert would hand over such a large sum to someone he barely knew. Regardless, Robert's situation only worsened. To clarify the matter, they had to wait until Chris regained consciousness. Thankfully, he opened his eyes in early January 2022, about 2 months after the attack. This marked the beginning of his long recovery process. Chris had to relearn basic skills such as walking, eating, and talking. He approached the rehabilitation process with determination, demonstrating strong physical abilities from the start. Unfortunately, his cognitive recovery did not go smoothly. After waking from the coma, he faced significant memory gaps, especially regarding the night of the attack. He couldn't even remember who Leslie was, or recall anything about that evening. Additionally, Chris had to live with a bullet lodged in his brain. Doctors couldn't remove the bullet due to the risks involved. They found that attempting surgery could cause damage to the surrounding area, potentially leading to serious consequences. As he continued to deal with memory issues, Robert's trial was set for April 2024. At the start of the hearing, prosecutors claimed that Robert had intentionally gone to Chris's house to kill Leslie Reeves after seeing them together that evening. Evidence showed that he had been following Leslie throughout the night, suspecting she was with someone else. When he discovered that she was dating a new man, he became extremely angry. Police found numerous text messages between him and his best friend, in which Robert frequently expressed his frustration with Leslie, particularly that evening. It was evident that he was affected by the situation. Until the very end, he still believed he was in a relationship with her and viewed Leslie's date with Chris and their trip home as a betrayal. After witnessing how happy Leslie and Chris were together, Robert returned home, where his daughter found him crying. Knowing that the couple had gone to Farmersville, he grabbed a gun and went to Chris's house. Robert entered through the back door, but was quickly spotted, leading to an attempt to stop him. A struggle ensued, resulting in a broken window. Robert then armed himself. Leslie and Chris attempted to defend themselves by pushing the refrigerator to block their path. Unfortunately, their efforts were in vain. Chris tried to shield Leslie but was shot, and shortly after, Leslie suffered the same fate. Robert's attorneys attempted to counter the prosecutor's claims. The defense emphasized the lack of direct evidence, portraying the case as a fabrication. They argued to the jury that the investigation was focused solely on accusing Robert of assaulting 2 people. In fact, there was no evidence at the crime scene directly linking Robert to the crime. Chris, a key witness, could not recall the events of that night and chose not to attend the trial, claiming that he did not remember anything. The prosecution's strongest evidence was a container found at Robert's home that held the bullets used in the attack on Leslie and Chris. Furthermore, Robert was responsible for packing and hiding the gun. He chose not to testify, which his attorney described as a strategic move. Additionally, the defense did not present any witnesses. After hearing the arguments, the jury deliberated for 3 hours and reached a unanimous verdict, finding Robert Tarr guilty of first-degree murder and attempted first-degree murder. He was sentenced to 85 years in prison, eligible for parole after 72 years, meaning he will likely spend the rest of his life behind bars. At this point, Chris finally took the stand in court and spoke about the impact the shooting had on him and his family. This tragic event completely destroyed Chris's life. At 49, he was never able to return to his beloved construction job. While he was in the hospital, his home was completely looted, and even his swimming pool was stolen. After his release, he auctioned off his home, which was later demolished, leaving only an empty lot. He now bore the responsibility of providing for his family. Friends and family remain hopeful that Chris Smith can rebuild his life. but there is a strong possibility that he will never be the same again. While waiting for his memory to improve, he practices every day and learns to do without assistance. Eventually, Chris regained his position as the lead singer in his band. However, the after effects of that senseless attack continue to haunt him as he recovers. The left side of his body remains paralyzed, and he has sought help from a leading medical research center. Chris is eager to participate in advanced research to aid his recovery. He is currently writing a book about his experiences, focusing on domestic violence. Leslie's children are in the care of her ex-husband. Hello everyone. Today we will learn about another case, the case of Susan Bailey. Susan was born in 1965 in a small town in Minnesota, USA. She was an ordinary, carefree girl who easily made friends and was sociable. Partly due to having many siblings, her parents had 4 children in total. Susan was smart, did well in school, and was responsible and non-confrontational. From a young age, her parents taught her the importance of independence and hard work. After graduating from high school, Susan enrolled in a local college. To avoid burdening her parents financially while paying for her education, she took a job as a saleswoman. It seemed like everything was falling into place for her. However, she never enjoyed the cold and gray weather of Minnesota and dreamed of moving south. After completing her studies, she decided to relocate to another state. This decision led Susan to the sunny beaches of California, fulfilling her childhood dream. There, she quickly found a job in retail and met a man, Mr. Bailey, who would become her husband. He was calm and reserved, pursuing a military career. They married in 1988. Although Susan's family disapproved of her choice due to the challenges of Mr. Bailey's profession, they ultimately accepted her decision. In the following years, they moved several times because of her husband's military service. While he worked, Susan spent most of her time at home and felt unhappy with this lifestyle. However, he promised to leave the military after his contract ended, which he did in 1990. They then returned to California, and Susan decided to become pregnant with their first child, a girl named Jennifer. 4 years later, they welcomed another child. They chose to focus on their careers to support their growing family. During this time, Susan found success in her retail career and became the primary breadwinner, while her husband struggled in his job. They switched roles, with him taking on the role of a stay-at-home dad, and Susan working to provide for the family. This change was made possible when Susan accepted a job with a new clothing company. In 1997, she was promoted to regional manager of Texas, which came with significant responsibilities. Susan realized she couldn't turn down this opportunity. She and the children relocated to Texas, where they decided to settle in a small town called Denton. In 2000, the Bailey family purchased a house with 4 bedrooms, a living room, and a separate playroom in the small town. It seemed like a perfect place for a peaceful family life. As Susan became part of the local community, she met her neighbors. They had children of school age and lived across the street. They spent a lot of time together, discussing local news. However, Susan later discovered something troubling. Whenever Jennifer visited the neighbor, she would leave with items in her hands. After these visits, the neighboring family noticed that money and belongings were missing, leading them to suspect that Jennifer was stealing. Despite this, her neighbor never brought up her concerns with Susan, possibly thinking that Susan was too busy with work and did not want to burden her with additional problems. As a result, the relationship with the neighbors became strained. Susan's son David faced several challenges. He struggled with bedwetting, which required her to change the bedding nearly every day, causing her stress. Additionally, David had behavioral issues and frequently got into trouble. However, these problems were minor compared to the bankruptcy of Susan's company, which led to her losing her job and significant income, severely impacting their family. At that time, she had started her own small cosmetic shop, but it did not compensate for the loss of her managerial position in a large firm. Eventually, she found work at another clothing store, but her new salary was much lower than her previous earnings. During this period, Susan realized her independence, while her husband struggled to find a job to support her. Their relationship became strained, and by 2006, they officially divorced. It remains unclear why her husband did not take any initiative to fight for custody of their children or their assets. He simply left everything to Susan without hesitation and agreed to pay child support. Susan was struggling with her own problems as well as those of her son and daughter, and everything seemed to be getting worse. For the first time, she felt overwhelmed by her new responsibilities. At the same time, she had to work 2 jobs to keep the family financially stable and avoid debt. This left her with little time to spend with her children. Susan was hardly ever home, and the children felt neglected. David was falling behind in school, skipping classes, and even resorting to self-harm in an attempt to get his mother's attention. His sister Jennifer took care of him, but she felt uncomfortable in that role and wanted to enjoy her own life instead. She often expressed her frustration about this. During this time, Jennifer met a boy named Paul Henson, who was a year younger than her. He lived with his family in a trailer park. Paul mentioned that he came from a troubled family, which resonated with Jennifer as she could relate to his struggles. However, Paul was quite unusual. He believed he had 2 distinct personalities. He described one of his 2 personalities as a reincarnation of a 10th century executioner, referring to it as his evil alter ego. Many of his classmates noticed Paul talking to himself, conversing with imaginary people and speaking in languages no one understood. He spent most of his free time playing fantasy computer games. Despite his unusual behavior, Paul genuinely liked Jennifer, and they started dating. Jennifer thought his eccentricities were just a product of his vivid imagination and gradually began to share his interests, playing the same games and acting oddly. For instance, they wore dog collars with each other's names. They also engaged in dark mystical practices, which eventually led to a love triangle. Paul revealed to Jennifer that one of his personalities was fond of her, while another personality of his had feelings for a girl named Marilee. Marilee was a 14-year-old from a wealthy family who appeared naive and impressionable. Marilee and Jennifer both fell under his influence, believing they all had mutual feelings for each other, leading to a complicated emotional situation. Susan Bailey strongly disliked Paul from the start and encouraged her daughter to end her relationship with the unusual Paul. However, Jennifer refused to heed her family's warnings. As a result, both their relationship and the home environment worsened quickly. Despite being told not to communicate with Paul, Jennifer was seen with him during the day when all the adults were home. Additionally, Jennifer regularly ignored her mother's requests regarding her schoolwork, chores, and taking care of David. Jennifer got a job at a fast food restaurant, which meant she was hardly ever home. This worried Susan, as David was often left unsupervised. To help, Susan's parents agreed to take David in for the month of July. During this time, they noticed an improvement in his behavior. They taught him household chores and introduced him to activities like fishing. However, they also observed some concerning behavior when David threw a tantrum in the car after his grandparents refused to buy him something on a whim. He rocked the car back and forth in frustration but calmed down as soon as they got home. This incident made his grandmother realize that David was struggling with emotional issues. Determined to help David, his grandparents began taking him to various doctors and clinics. His grandmother wanted him to stay longer so they could address his problems, but Susan was reluctant to let him stay for too long. Eventually, she bought a ticket and insisted that David return home. When he did, he surprised his mother and sister with his good behavior and even brought Jennifer a small gift. At this point, Susan had been considering buying a car for Jennifer to make her commute to work easier. But Susan realized she didn't have enough money. Jennifer was unhappy about this and insisted she needed a car for convenience. Her mother asked her to be patient. A month later, Susan was shocked to receive a bill for the children's phone services that totaled $1,500. She found out that Jennifer had been spending all her free time talking to Paul, while David was frequently online, which led to high charges. Susan explained to her children that this was unacceptable and urged them to reduce their phone usage. Shortly after, Susan received a notification that Jennifer had spent an additional $200 on phone calls. Furious and already facing financial difficulties, Susan confronted Jennifer, who claimed that her paycheck had been delayed and that she intended to cover the costs herself. At that point, Susan decided to contact the restaurant where Jennifer worked to inquire about the delay in her daughter's pay. For the past month and a half, Jennifer had not shown up for work, so there was no paycheck for her. This shocked Susan, who realized that Jennifer had been dishonest. Instead of working, she had been spending time with her boyfriend. The next day, Susan at work, leaving David home alone, wandering around the courtyard of the house without clothes, which scared the neighbors. At that moment, Susan understood that she had lost control over her children and felt powerless to change things. To support the family, she had to work all the time. By the end of September, the situation had worsened. Jennifer decided to take advantage of her mother's constant work schedule. She started inviting Paul and Marilee over to the guest room, where her father used to live, spending time with them while Susan was away. When Susan was home, they acted like good guests, but as soon as she left, they behaved rudely. David was aware of everything but kept it a secret from Susan, supporting his sister and her friends. Eventually, they all grew tired of their parents' restrictions on their lives. This frustration led to a dangerous plan to kill Jennifer's mothers and Marilee's mothers, as well as Paul's parents. The trio became involved in various criminal ideas, including poisoning Susan with crushed prescription pills or arranging for her to be electrocuted in the bath. They also considered using a baseball bat, knives to cause serious injury. Paul even thought about shooting his father and stepmother, while Marilee planned to stab her mother while she slept. In the final phase of their plan, the teenagers intended to steal Susan's car, take their parents' money, and escape to Canada. On September 22, 2008, 14-year-old Marilee White had been missing for several days and had not answered her phone. Concerned, her mother reported her daughter as missing. Marilee's friends were also unable to contact her. Marilee's mother took action by distributing flyers with Marilee's photo and contacting the police. Fortunately, a patrol found Marilee wandering aimlessly on the outskirts of town and brought her home. During this time, Marilee revealed that Paul, a friend, had abandoned her. The police persuaded her not to run away again, and it appeared that she had calmed down. However, on the morning of September 23, 2008, Marilee's mother woke up feeling a strange presence. When she opened her eyes, she saw Marilee standing over her bed with a large kitchen knife. Instead of attacking, she reacted defensively as Marilee demanded the car keys to drive to the Bailey family's house. Marilee planned to gather others and escape to Canada. Although she reluctantly gave her the keys, she prevented Marilee from leaving. As soon as Marilee stepped outside, she called the police. Authorities intercepted Marilee and took her to a juvenile detention center. There, Marilee told her cellmate about a plan to kill their parents, but nobody took her seriously. At this time, Paul Henson waited for his father and stepmother to leave their trailer in the morning to go shopping. He broke into his father's room and took his .22 caliber handgun. He intended to shoot them when they returned, but they unexpectedly stopped at a movie theater and then went to visit friends, which delayed him return. Frustrated by the wait, Paul decided to leave and went back to Susan's house. That evening, Marilee was released from custody, and at the same time, Paul's parents reported him missing. The next day, September 24, David took a large knife with him to school. When the school administration learned about it, they issued a written warning to his mother. Susan put the warning on the refrigerator, but was too busy to address it right away. The following day, a police officer approached her to inform her about the search for Paul Henson, suggesting he might be at their house. Although she couldn't find him there, she noticed clear signs that he had been visiting frequently. The detective asked for permission to enter the house and talk to Jennifer, and she agreed. From the beginning, Jennifer seemed nervous. The detective knew about the teenager's deceptive plan and decided to ask Jennifer where Paul was. She said she hadn't seen her boyfriend since Saturday. The detective then requested to speak with her alone, but her mother, Susan, refused. Suspecting that Paul might be hiding in the house, the detective asked to search the premises, but Susan denied the request, stating that a warrant was needed. As a result, the detective left without any new information. The search for Paul continued, and another police officer arrived at the Bailey home. This time, Susan was informed that there were reports suggesting Paul might have a missing .22 caliber pistol from his father's trailer. Worried about safety, she reluctantly allowed the search, although she was not happy about it. During the search, they found several suspicious items, including a large butcher knife, hidden under a couch cushion in the living room. Since the knife did not belong to the Baileys, Susan accused Jennifer of planning to run away with Paul again. Jennifer explained that her friend might have accidentally left his knife at her house during his last visit, but this explanation did not convince Susan. Without waiting for the police to leave, Susan started arguing with her daughter again. Susan threatened to send her to live with her father or grandparents. During a search of Jennifer's room, they found evidence that she was packing her belongings. They also discovered several knives, which raised suspicions. However, since they couldn't find Paul's gun, the police left the house. Later, the mother found a box of ammunition hidden in one of the suitcases and became worried. She called the police again, requesting a more thorough search of her home. When they returned, the police took the ammunition but still did not find a gun. Instead, they found even more knives scattered around the house. In the trash, they found an empty bottle of antidepressants that belonged to Marilee. The Bailey family did not use such medications, but the police were unaware of this girl at the time and overlooked these concerning signs. Paul's father arrived at the house anxious about his son. He packed up Paul's belongings and left with everyone else. The following day, Susan struggled to find a way to resolve issues with her children, but nothing seemed to work. On September 25, she went to her regular job, followed by her second job, finally finishing around midnight. Throughout the day, Susan tried to contact her children, but both ignored her calls and messages. When she got home, she immediately sensed that something was off. The lights were off. Inside, she discovered the usual chaos left by her children. As she moved upstairs in the darkness, the house felt eerily quiet. As Susan climbed the stairs, someone suddenly grabbed her by the neck and covered her mouth with a cloth that had a chemical smell. Just then, Jennifer, Paul, and David stepped out of the shadows. They quickly slit Susan's throat and began stabbing her repeatedly with knives until she lay motionless on the floor within minutes. However, this horrific act was only part of their sinister plan. On September 26, Susan's mother received multiple calls from worried colleagues about Susan, as she had not shown up for her shifts that morning, a surprising behavior for someone who was known to be a workaholic. Susan's mother made several attempts to contact Susan, but was unsuccessful. Eventually, she reached out to the police department in Roanoke, Texas, asking them to check on the Bailey family's home. Over the next 2 days, patrol officers visited the house multiple times, but found no evidence that anyone was there. The lights were off, no cars were in the driveway, and all the doors and windows were closed. There were no signs of distress. It appeared as if the family had gone on vacation. Despite this, Susan's mother was deeply concerned that something might have gone wrong and urged the police to continue investigating. At 3:30 a.m. on September 28, 2008, a police officer in South Dakota spotted a suspicious vehicle parked near a closed gas station. He stopped to observe and noticed a teenager got out without turning on the headlights, did something briefly, then returned to the vehicle, and they all drove away. The officer decided to follow them. He saw that the car had Texas license plates, indicating they had traveled a long distance. However, it was unusual for teenagers to be out so late alone, making the situation seem very odd. The police officer pulled over the car and noticed a teenager driving. In the passenger seat was another minor, a girl, and in the back seat was a younger boy with a large dog. The car was stopped, and they were asked for identification, but none of them had any. The driver was 16-year-old Paul Henson. When the police officer checked his information, he discovered that Paul had been reported as a runaway and was also a suspect in a firearms case. The car belonged to Susan Bailey. Backup was requested, and they searched the stolen vehicle, but no gun was found. Jennifer's statements were inconsistent from the beginning. She appeared frightened and exhausted. Meanwhile, Texas police were alerted that the missing persons had been located. When Texas detectives heard this, they realized that Susan would never have allowed her children to travel that far without her. They suspected that something had happened to her and decided it was time to thoroughly investigate the Bailey home, especially after numerous requests from Susan's parents and colleagues. Upon entering the house, the detectives were immediately hit by a strong smell of decomposition. On the first floor, they found only a plate of pudding that had fallen on the floor. Forensic analysis later revealed that the pudding was laced with drugs. On the second floor, at the top of the stairs, they discovered Susan lying face down, blood everywhere. She had suffered 26 stab wounds and had been brutally beaten with a blunt object. The bathtub was filled with water, and an electric cord with exposed wires was hanging from the curtain plugged in. It appeared that someone had meticulously planned multiple methods to murder her. The smell of decomposition mixed with the smell of toiletries. A receipt found in the house confirmed that 13-year-old David had purchased these cleaning supplies at a local Walmart at the indicated time. In Jennifer's room, investigators found a diary in which she detailed plans for committing murder and starting a new life with Paul in Canada. They also uncovered additional evidence, including freshly cut hair belonging to Paul, clothing stained with Susan's blood, and DNA traces from Jennifer and David. It was clear that the teenagers had not effectively cleaned up the murder scene. The 3 suspects were detained in Texas, while a dog associated with them was taken to a shelter. The juvenile offenders quickly began to speak. Paul Henson accused David of the murder, claiming they all fled their town to protect the boy from the authorities. When detectives questioned David, he admitted to killing his mother and laughed. The detectives were taken aback. They did not expect such a response from a 13-year-old. Jennifer placed all the blame on Paul, insisting that she and her brother had done nothing wrong. The only person who avoided severe punishment was Marilee White, who was not in the car and had no evidence linking her to Susan's murder. However, she remained under police scrutiny for a long time and was questioned multiple times. Eventually, Marilee confirmed her friend's boyfriend's claims that they had planned to kill their families. She shared many details about their relationships. According to Marilee, Paul, Jennifer, and she had become very close. Paul enjoyed being intimate with both girls simultaneously, arguing that since he was dating Jennifer and had a separate relationship with Marilee, it wasn't cheating. The group engaged in occult practices, including cutting themselves and drinking each other's blood. Jennifer's plan was to kill all their parents, escape to Canada, and start their own commune. Because of her cooperation with the police, no charges were filed against Marilee. She was compelled to testify at the trial against the other conspirators. Based on her testimony, the prosecution believed that Jennifer ambushed her mother in a hallway on the second floor and attacked her with a bat, while Paul Henson came from behind and cut her throat. David also took part in the crime and inflicted superficial stab wounds on her body. Jennifer and Paul, despite being minors, were tried as adults for murder and each received a 60-year prison sentence. They will be eligible for parole starting in 2038. David was also tried as an adult for his involvement in the crime and was convicted of complicity, receiving a 26-year sentence. He will be eligible for release in 2034 when he turns 40. Following these events, Marilee White moved to a different state with her mother and changed her name. Her photo is kept confidential to protect her safety, as she was a young witness. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Bianca Edmonds. Bianca Edmonds was the second of 4 children, with 2 brothers and 1 sister. When Bianca was young, her father took a job with a mining company, which kept him away from home for long periods. This created tension in the family, as her mother wanted him to spend more time with them, but he could not quit his job. This eventually led to their separation. Bianca's mother later remarried another man, who adopted Bianca and her siblings. As a result, Bianca was often referred to by her stepfather's surname, Edmonds. This did not bother the family or Edmonds much, as she had little contact with her biological father in her early years. However, as she grew older and finished school, she reconnected with her biological father, and they developed a close relationship. After completing her secondary education, Bianca joined the Australian Navy. Unfortunately, a year later, she injured her back during training, which led to her being discharged for health reasons. After recovering, she worked various jobs in the retail industry but found it difficult to hold down a permanent position. In 2007, she gave birth to her first son after starting a relationship with a man. However, the man was not interested in family life, and they eventually broke up. By this time, Bianca had matured and knew what she wanted in life. She longed for reliable support and a comfortable lifestyle. In early 2012, shortly after turning 26, she met Michael Capo Siena, who was 35. Their relationship progressed rapidly, and they got married that same year. At the end of 2012, Bianca became pregnant again, and on June 3, 2013, she gave birth to a son. Although their relationship progressed quickly, it was toxic from the start. Michael often complained that Bianca was too controlling. The couple argued frequently, and shortly after the birth of their son, they decided to divorce. In early 2015, Bianca met Glenn Cassidy, a 48-year-old man, through a dating app. As usual, Bianca acted quickly. She appreciated Glenn's gentle nature, which suited her desire to be proactive in the relationship. Their initial online flirtation quickly turned into a real-life meeting and intimacy. Although Glenn was 20 years older than Bianca and was married with 2 children from a previous marriage, their similar life experiences seemed to help them connect quickly. In February 2016, they got married. Meanwhile, Bianca faced a number of personal challenges, most notably a custody battle with her ex-husband, Michael. Bianca's second husband, Michael, was initially not very involved in their son's life and often refused to see him. However, things changed when Michael entered a new relationship, achieved financial stability, and decided to spend more time with his son, who was then 9 months old. In March 2014, Michael requested visitation rights for his son. This led to a number of disputes, with Bianca accusing her ex-husband of being toxic and unfit to be a father. Michael decided to file a lawsuit against Bianca. By August 2015, after several court hearings, he was granted visitation rights, but with strict restrictions. He could only see his son in a neutral location under supervision, with 2-hour visits in Melbourne, a 2-hour drive from where Michael lived. This arrangement caused significant inconvenience for Bianca. She was unhappy that Michael was still interfering in their son's life, and she wanted to sever the relationship but could not find a way to do so. Unfortunately, the situation did not improve. Michael decided to take legal action again, seeking to increase the time and frequency of his visitation with his son and to remove the supervision requirement. This frustrated Bianca even more, leading to numerous arguments that sometimes escalated into physical confrontations. Michael's girlfriend described Bianca as a toxic person who tried to limit Michael's communication with his son out of anger. She said that Michael had changed his mind and wanted to reconnect with the child, and that he was legally entitled to do so. Michael's girlfriend portrayed him as a devoted family man with a kind personality. On the other hand, Glenn, who was in a relationship with Bianca, viewed Michael as a toxic and cruel person who could pose a threat to his son. Bianca frequently expressed her concerns about Michael to Glenn, claiming that he had threatened to kidnap her son. Bianca also attempted to manipulate her son psychologically by telling him that Michael, his biological father, was a bad person, but this tactic did not have the desired effect. Instead, she began to manipulate Glenn, using him as her main tool. Tensions in the family escalated, largely due to Bianca's provocations. She refused to be intimate with her husband unless he agreed to the idea of her ex-husband Michael's death. Over time, their relationship deteriorated. Bianca began to pressure and belittle Glenn, calling him a coward for not dealing with Michael and for not helping her. Initially, Glenn took her words as a joke, but over time, he began to seriously consider killing Michael due to the constant pressure he faced when his wife suggested planning the action. Glenn had written a fairly basic list of important points by hand. He wanted to shoot his enemy and then find a way to dispose of the body. In addition, Glenn's notes were full of spelling errors, highlighting his difficulties with writing. Bianca had received support from her husband, and she prepared him to commit the crime. Glenn desperately wanted to have a child with her, and her manipulation regarding intimacy worked. The couple, who had difficulty conceiving, shared their struggles with their friends. Bianca cleverly convinced Glenn that after Michael died, he would definitely have an heir. After this plan was documented, they began to prepare and execute it step by step. They searched for the best location for an ambush and created a map of the area where Michael lived with his new girlfriend. Bianca's knowledge of the layout of Michael's house helped her create a detailed plan, including the locations of doors and windows. They were very thorough in their preparations. They even mapped out the locations of streetlights and nearby houses with barking dogs. Bianca was eager to proceed and urged that Michael be killed as soon as possible. However, each time they set a date, things went wrong, causing delays. Glenn visited Michael's house several times to assess the entrances and exits of various streets. During these visits, he would call Bianca to discuss any problems that were interfering with their plans. He often expressed frustration that Michael was not home at the scheduled time, as he seemed to be working late or socializing with friends. The attackers communicated in code and referred to the area around Michael's house as the workplace. Glenn often stayed late, waiting for the target of the attack. Despite Bianca's encouragement, Glenn remained anxious and uncertain. Bianca employed her main tactic, intimacy, assuring him that once Michael was dead, he would have everything he wanted. Later, for reasons unknown, the police obtained a recording of their conversation. In response, Glenn installed a call recording app on his cell phone, possibly suspecting that he was being manipulated and wanting to protect himself in case things went wrong. Regardless, this did not absolve him of guilt for the shooting that followed. While carrying out this heinous plan, Bianca was supposed to be on vacation with Glenn's mother. The destination was on the other side of Australia, likely chosen to provide Bianca with an alibi that would convince the police of her innocence. On March 11, 2016, she prepared for the trip and spoke to Glenn about their plans. The next day, March 12, Glenn drove 170 kilometers to Michael's house. At 12:23 p.m., he sent another text message, expressing his love for her and speaking angrily about Michael. Around 1 p.m. that same day, Glenn drove to the road leading to Michael's house. He reiterated his love for Bianca and his willingness to carry out his plan. During this time, Glenn set up an ambush, positioning himself to see the front door of the house. When Michael and Silvana Silva, his girlfriend, arrived home, they settled in to watch a movie. At 7:18 p.m., Silvana looked out the window and saw a man get out of his car and walk toward their house empty-handed. Recognizing him, she told Michael, feeling confused. This was odd since they lived far from Bianca and her new husband, leaving them puzzled as to how he had gotten there. Glenn noticed some people walking by, then returned to his car, presumably to assess the area and collect his thoughts. At 7:27 p.m., he got out of his car again, this time carrying a large white bag. After checking around and confirming that no one was nearby, he approached Michael's front door at 7:30 p.m. Glenn knocked on the door, and his sudden appearance at such a late hour made Michael nervous. He went into the kitchen and grabbed a large knife for protection. Silvana opened the door slightly and kept it on the chain. A brief conversation ensued, in which Michael told Glenn that he could not help Glenn. Glenn then held out his hand as if to say goodbye, and Michael, thinking it was safe, shook his hand. This turned out to be a grave mistake. Glenn grabbed Michael's hand, forcing him into the house. A struggle broke out as Glenn attempted to pull out a handgun and aim it at Michael's head. Michael fought back violently with the knife, striking Glenn several times. Tragically, a shot rang out, killing Michael instantly. Glenn then pointed the gun at Silvana, apparently intending to eliminate her as a witness. However, he had only loaded one bullet into the gun, and when he pulled the trigger, the handgun clicked but did not fire. In a fit of rage, he struck Silvana with his gun, knocking her unconscious. Glenn may have intended to kill her, but after the first blow, he collapsed to the floor, bleeding heavily from a stab wound. By 9:32 p.m., the situation was over. Silvana regained consciousness and found both men dead. She called emergency services, reporting that she had been attacked and that her fiancé had died. She had only suffered a minor concussion from the blow to her head and was weakened by blood loss. When the police arrived, they found a chaotic scene. Silvana gave a detailed account of the events, but as the sole survivor, she became the prime suspect. The police quickly determined that Silvana had nothing to do with the murder. They located Glenn's car parked on the street across from the house. Inside, they found his untouched lunch of fried chicken and green beans. A database check confirmed that the car belonged to Glenn. Police reviewed surveillance camera footage and accessed Glenn's mobile phone. The case was complicated from the start, taking 3 months for police to identify Bianca as the mastermind behind the attack. She apparently believed she would escape, so she was shocked when the police arrived at her home. Bianca Edmonds was arrested in December 2016 and taken to the police station for questioning, where she became hysterical. She acted as if Glenn was making things up and tried to convince him that he had not made a terrible mistake. However, he ignored her warnings and went ahead with his plan while she was away. Bianca claimed that her boyfriend was furious with Michael's behavior and that he was going to take their son away. According to Bianca, Glenn wanted to spend more time with the child. Although Glenn was not the boy's biological father, he had long wanted a child. The police knew this was a lie. Evidence from Glenn's phone confirmed their suspicions. The phone contained saved text messages and recorded calls detailing the planned crime. The police uncovered a wealth of information about the murder plot that had been in the works for months. In her defense, Bianca presented the last text message Glenn had sent her, in which he expressed his love for her and his hatred for Michael. She claimed that this text message made her aware of the impending attack, which she felt powerless to prevent. However, the police quickly noticed a major problem with the notes Glenn had written about the murder plan. They were full of spelling errors. In contrast, the text message Bianca received was perfectly written, too perfectly, and it resembled her own writing style. This led the police to suspect that she had sent the text messages from Glenn's phone to create a false narrative. Bianca denied any involvement in the crime and claimed she knew nothing about it. Despite the strong case against Bianca, the police did not have enough evidence to charge her at the time. She dismissed the charges and denied any involvement in the murder. As a result, she was released, and the investigation continued. During this time, Bianca became bored and returned to Tinder in search of new dates. Just 3 weeks after Glenn's death, she met a man who had just been released from prison on parole. He had a history of violent crime, including the murder of his first wife by slitting her throat in front of their 6-year-old son. Early in their relationship, Bianca informed him that her third husband, Glenn, had died of cancer just weeks after they were to marry. Bianca was pregnant but unfortunately lost the baby in an accident. Her new boyfriend later discovered Glenn and Michael online. He confronted her about the incident, and she revealed that she had planned the murder but insisted that Glenn should not die. She explained that she was too scared to share this with him when they first met, worried that he would not want to continue their relationship. Bianca also admitted to sending text messages from her husband's phone to mislead the investigation. She expressed deep regret for Glenn's death, explaining that she only intended to get rid of Michael. Her motive was fear that he might gain custody of their son. Following Bianca's confession, she became panicked and expressed fear of being caught by the police. Her boyfriend reported her statements to the police. In April 2018, Bianca was questioned again. Despite her boyfriend's testimony, she continued to deny sending the text messages, claiming that she had never seen any maps of Michael's house and denying any involvement in any plans to kill her ex-husband. The police informed her that her fingerprints had been found on the handgun used in the shooting. She was initially unable to respond to this information but continued to deny that custody issues were a motive for the crime. When the police recounted her boyfriend's account, she admitted that she could not remember the conversation. During this time, Bianca suffered from depression after the loss of her child, which she attributed to her mental health and the effects of her antidepressants. Unfortunately, the police determined that they did not have enough evidence to arrest her and were forced to release her. This situation continued until June 2019. Meanwhile, the police had gathered enough evidence to prove that she had either incited or directly participated in the murder of her ex-husband, Michael. The case was delayed, and it was not until June 2022 that hearings began regarding her involvement in Michael's murder. The prosecutor's office believes that Bianca's main motive was her desire to avoid sharing custody of her child and her fear that the father might take the child away. The police discovered that Bianca had planned to imprison her third husband, Glenn, to remove him from her life, as she found him too old and was bored with him. However, the attack did not go as planned, resulting in the deaths of both Michael and Glenn. The prosecution argued that Bianca had written a text message pretending to be Glenn to create an alibi. They also revealed that the outing with Glenn's mother was part of the plan for the crime. To convince the jury, they thoroughly analyzed all the recordings of conversations and text messages. All available evidence was presented, including a map that Bianca was said to have drawn. Bianca's DNA and fingerprints were found on the murder weapon, which clearly indicated that she had lied. Her attorney claimed that this was only circumstantial evidence. It was believed that Glenn disliked Michael because of his relationship with her son. However, several witnesses testified for the prosecution, claiming that Bianca had long wanted to get rid of Michael, her ex-husband, due to a custody dispute. Even Bianca's mother testified in court that the day after the murder, her daughter called to confess that Glenn should not have died and that it was her fault. Bianca claimed that the fingerprints found on the murder weapon were the result of an intimate encounter between her and Glenn. She stated that he was aroused when she pointed the gun at him, but this explanation seemed implausible and did not account for her dishonesty during the interrogations. A few weeks after she began contacting her new boyfriend, Bianca discovered that she was pregnant again. He offered to recant his statement to the police if she forgave him and returned to him, but Bianca believed that the real father of the child was someone else. The jury deliberated on the complicated case but could not reach a unanimous verdict, leading to the cancellation of the original hearings. A retrial began in August, but it was also found to be flawed due to arguments that violated court rules. In December 2022, the case returned to court, this time with all the evidence gathered during the investigation presented. The prosecution presented strong evidence, including text messages exchanged between Bianca and Glenn. In these messages, Bianca mentioned celebrating a special day, although she had no legitimate reason for the occasion. This implied a connection to the murder. Ultimately, the jury concluded that Bianca was the cunning mastermind behind this terrible crime. 2 lives were lost, one of which was cruelly deceived. People were horrified by the level of manipulation Glenn faced before his death. Bianca recognized his weakness and exploited it to her own advantage, trying to achieve multiple goals at once. However, Glenn's death was not part of her plan. She mistakenly believed she could convince her husband to admit his guilt and escape the consequences. Bianca Edmonds was sentenced to 26 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 20 years. Her children were placed in foster care with relatives, leaving them without parental care. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Laura Salmon. On May 31, 1984, an elderly farmer named Johnny Muckle came to the Rutherford County Sheriff's Office. He reported that he had been driving through his field and noticed something unusual. As he got closer, he discovered a girl lying dead in the field, her face covered in blood. Alarmed, he immediately contacted the police without disturbing the scene. Several officers, including the sheriff, accompanied him back to the scene, where they found the body of a blonde girl. She was wearing only her bra, as the rest of her clothing had been removed. The perpetrator had covered her with 2 pairs of jeans, one for women and one for men, and wrapped a black jacket around her upper body, with one sleeve tied tightly around her neck. The police found the entire scene unusual. They had never encountered anything like it in their many years of service. The autopsy revealed that the victim was clutching her underwear in her right hand, and her jeans were identified as part of her clothing. She had suffered multiple injuries, the most serious of which was to her head. Interestingly, Johnny reported that the girl's body was discovered near an abandoned quarry. This location is known to attract students from nearby educational institutions who often gather there to drink and socialize. It is possible that one of these gatherings ended in a violent incident, which is currently under investigation. While this information guides the investigation, it also expands the list of potential suspects to hundreds of juveniles. In order to focus on more specific suspects, additional data collection and analysis are required. The victim was identified as Laura Salmon, 18, a freshman at Middle Tennessee State University located in her hometown of Murfreesboro. Laura attended Oakland High School, where her mother, Lorene Mackey, taught English. Her parents were divorced at the time. Just days before the incident, Laura had moved in with her father because the school year had ended. She missed him and was going to spend part of the holiday with him. Laura was a kind, attractive, and sociable girl who enjoyed attending lively gatherings. As a young woman, she was crowned Little Miss Murfreesboro and showcased her acting talents in summer plays at the local theater. Laura was also very intelligent, graduating with honors and planning to continue her studies at college to build a solid career. She had started attending the local university in the fall of 1983, just 6 months before the tragic incident. She had just started a relationship with her boyfriend, David Kyle Gilly. Laura was well-liked and had no enemies who wanted to harm her. Police believed she may have been a random murder victim. An autopsy was completed on June 2, 1984. The forensic expert found at least 2 blunt force injuries to her head, likely caused by a rock or similar object. These blows resulted in brain damage. Laura suffered fatal head injuries from the repeated attacks. She lost consciousness and died within 10 minutes, and even immediate medical attention could not save her. Initially, there were concerns about the possibility that Laura had been abused, but the forensic results found no signs of this. However, the expert pointed out that Laura had been consensual in her intimate relations within 24 to 48 hours before the incident. It is believed that she may have had a boyfriend. It is possible the attacker staged the crime scene to mislead the police. Forensic teams collected samples from the clothing covering her body for further analysis. Additionally, tire tracks found in the area could belong to either Laura's car or the attacker's car, prompting the police to examine Laura's vehicle. One of the officers knew Laura. She worked as a cashier at a grocery store he frequented after work. He recognized her car and decided to check the store's parking lot. On June 3, he found Laura's car abandoned in the lot, which was subsequently taken to the lab for examination. When the forensic team examined the interior, they found no fingerprints, not even Laura's. This was unusual, indicating that the car may have been thoroughly cleaned, possibly by the perpetrator. However, they did find dirt in the wheel wells and some hairs of unknown origin under the floor mat. These samples were collected for analysis. The soil found in the wheel wells matched the particles on the floor mats of the driver and passenger areas, and when compared to the materials found at the crime scene, they matched as well. Evidence clearly showed that the tire tracks near the crime scene belonged to Laura's car, suggesting that the killer was not a random stranger, but someone who knew her well, including her workplace. As police gathered and analyzed the information, they interviewed people close to Laura, starting with her mother, Lorene Mackey. Lorene immediately suspected her daughter's boyfriend, David, because she was aware of the toxic nature of their relationship and had never supported it. She described David as jealous and possessive, almost like a stalker. Lorene noted that many of Laura's encounters with David ended in arguments. This was extremely distressing to her, as she felt her daughter was ignoring important warning signs. Despite the efforts of several family members, including Laura's father, they were unable to convince Laura that David was a danger. Tragically, this may have contributed to Laura's early death. At that time, personal relationship issues were not considered matters for the police to handle. People generally believed that they should resolve such matters themselves. The police spoke with Lorene's mother and then met with her father and stepmother. Lorene stated that she had last spoken to Laura on the morning of May 31, just a few days before the body was discovered. On that day, Laura had slept over at her friend Trina's house, and they were together until late at night. On the morning of June 1, the girls slept in and woke up around 9 a.m. They then left. Laura went to work at the store, where she was scheduled to work until lunchtime. Trina was supposed to replace her at 2 p.m., after which Laura planned to check her semester grades and then go swimming at her grandmother's pool. However, when Trina arrived at the store around 1 p.m., she discovered that Laura was not there. Her coworkers said that Laura had taken time off and left early. Laura was wearing the same jeans that were found on her body. Laura's car was discovered at work at 3:30 p.m., which was unusual since she was not there. It is unclear when she arrived because there were no surveillance cameras at that time. Laura's father, Salman, last saw his daughter and confirmed that she was with her friend Trina that day. The two girls had been friends since childhood and worked together at the grocery store. Trina helped piece together the events of May 31 and supported Laura's family's concerns. She knew that Laura was afraid of her boyfriend David because he was harassing her, making him a suspect in Laura's murder. Laura had begun talking to other guys because she wanted to break up with David, but was too afraid to tell him directly. She tried to avoid him to signal that their relationship was over. Laura often expressed feeling unsafe around her ex-boyfriend, who was violent towards her, and her fears were well-founded. David Kyle Gilley's behavior became increasingly cruel, making the situation unacceptable. Several co-workers at the grocery store confirmed that Laura and David had a very bad relationship. Witnesses reported that David would come to the store to accuse Laura of cheating and harass her. He used harsh words and even resorted to hitting Laura. David was very possessive. When questioned at the police station, he claimed that Laura was swimming with her grandmother and that he had not seen her. He did not mention their previous encounter before the incident. Witnesses reported seeing Laura with a man in her car that day. After they left together, Laura's car reappeared in the parking lot, but she was missing. No one saw her arrive or park, suggesting that the killer may have left the car there. The police had no evidence against David, so they released him. Unfortunately, the conversation with him was not recorded. A week later, David was questioned again, this time about the last day he spent with Laura. David said that they had a good time on May 30 and that they had not argued. They left Laura's grandmother's apartment at around 9 p.m. in his car, parked behind a church, and were intimate. He then drove her back to her grandmother's house, and they left at around 2 a.m. in separate cars. David went to work, believing that Laura had returned to her father's house. He left work at 7 a.m. and went straight to bed, waking up at 3 p.m. He claimed that he was home during the murder, and his father supported his alibi. The next interview took place in July. David added to his previous claim that after they were intimate, they used jeans in his car to clean up. This detail seemed odd, and the inconsistencies in his testimony raised suspicions, but there was still no evidence against him. The police worked to piece together a timeline of events leading up to the murder. They discovered that on May 30, Laura had been dancing with a man at a nightclub. It was later revealed that the man was one of Laura's friends and that he had a verified alibi for the time of the murder. A new suspect emerged when a Nashville woman reported being abused. During the attack, the attacker mentioned a woman named Laura, threatening to hurt her like he did Laura if she resisted or reported him. During the investigation, police discovered that the suspect also attended the same college as Laura, frequented the gym where she worked out, and often saw her at campus parties. He was also near the school on the day of the murder. Police compared hair found in Laura's car to that of the new suspect. However, DNA analysis at the time was insufficient to make a definitive match. The new suspect was eventually ruled out because the hair samples found in Laura's car did not match him, and he had a solid alibi. As the investigation continued to stall, Laura's parents grew increasingly concerned that the search for the killer might be stalled as well. Concerns about the investigation were confirmed over time due to several police errors. The crime scene was not properly secured, and police collected evidence without using gloves, which could have contaminated it. When Laura's father arrived at the area where his daughter's body was found, he noticed her necklace, which the police had overlooked. He took it to the police station, further cementing his belief that the police had been careless in their investigation. Sadly, Laura's family was right. It took 16 years for the investigation to progress. The case became one of many unsolved cold cases. It wasn't until 2000 that a police team was formed to reinvestigate Laura's case and finally identify her killer. For police officer Dan Goodwin, it was a personal matter because he knew Laura, they had been in college together, and had gone to the movies with friends just 4 days before her death. During his first meeting with Laura's family, Goodwin promised to uncover the truth behind her death. Eventually, the police gained access to advanced technology that allowed them to re-examine old evidence. They sent the clothing found on Laura's body to a lab to create a DNA profile. While reviewing Laura's file, the police found a note that contradicted the alibi of Laura's ex-boyfriend, David Kyle Gilley, who claimed he was home at the time of Laura's murder. It was discovered that the police had a witness who contradicted David's alibi. During this time, David's stepfather insisted that he was home, but a woman reported seeing him in a car near the field where Laura's body was found. The woman was located and reinterrogated, confirming her previous account from years earlier. and providing the police with fairly accurate details. She stated that the young man she saw driving Laura's car that day had a blank expression on his face and closely resembled the photo of David that had appeared in the newspaper at the time of the murder. In the new investigation, police spoke to Laura's friends, who described David's anxious behavior after the incident. They noted that he appeared to have no remorse for Laura's death and even spoke arrogantly about her. A new witness revealed that at a party, David confessed to her that he had committed the murder during a private conversation. He had threatened her and expressed a desire to attack her, warning that he would harm her if she did not comply. Fortunately, another friend intervened and scared David away. Meanwhile, forensic experts tested the evidence on the clothing and discovered that the blood was Laura's. The only remaining question was about the semen found on the jeans. They needed a biological sample from David for comparison. Unfortunately, he had moved away, so the police began looking for him. David had relocated to Florida in 1986. He was twice divorced, had a daughter, and worked for the Department of Public Works. David also had a criminal record that included abuse, attempted burglary, and resisting arrest, fitting the profile of someone who might have harmed Laura. After meeting with the police, David significantly changed his story. He denied being intimate with Laura the day before the murder and claimed that he had never been jealous or used physical violence. The police obtained a warrant for David's arrest, allowing them to collect all the necessary documents for DNA analysis and comparison with the evidence. On May 31, 2000, laboratory tests confirmed that the blood on David's jeans belonged to both Laura and him. It was likely that he had been wearing the jeans during the crime, as both Laura's and his blood were found on the fabric. The police had suspected David from the beginning of the investigation, and it took months of additional testing to confirm their theories. Unfortunately, it took 17 years to officially prove his guilt. In November 2001, David attended another interview where he contradicted his previous statements. He claimed that he had never had a serious relationship with Laura, describing their interactions as light flirting. He asserted that he had never affected her emotionally or physically, was not jealous, and did not control her actions. This was in direct contradiction to the accounts of many witnesses who disagreed with him. His only admission was that the jeans found on Laura's body were likely his, but he claimed that he had accidentally left them there. These inconsistencies in his testimony provided enough evidence to charge him. By the time the interview ended, David realized he was in trouble and asked for a lawyer. He was arrested on the night of November 14, 2001, and charged with first-degree murder. After the murder, procedural issues arose because David was under 18 at the time of the crime. His case, which involved an adult, was transferred to juvenile court. In 2002, preliminary hearings were held to decide whether the case should be transferred to adult district court. On February 1, 2002, it was finally decided that he would be tried as an adult. During the next preliminary hearing, challenges arose regarding the selection of witnesses for both the prosecution and the defense. The prosecutor's office wanted several of Laura's friends, as well as her mother, to testify before the grand jury. After lengthy discussions, the witness list was finalized. The trial began 22 years after Laura Salmon's death. On August 26, 2006, David Kyle Gilley had been in prison for 5 years awaiting trial. Multiple witnesses testified, revealing the extent of the cruelty he had shown toward Laura throughout their relationship. Disturbing incidents were recounted. Several witnesses reported hearing David make threats out of jealousy. He assaulted Laura, causing her injuries, including a broken nose, and even threatened the dormitory manager at her college. On one occasion, after a heated argument, he nearly threw Laura down a flight of stairs, but the presence of witnesses may have prevented him from causing serious injury. In high school, classmates witnessed David's abusive behavior toward Laura. He assaulted her by slamming her head into a metal cabinet, pushing her against a wall, and slapping her. When Laura expressed a desire to break up, David locked her in a cabinet and banged on the door from the outside. Others heard him threaten to kill her if they broke up. One evening, while playing near the quarry where Laura was later found, friends saw David break her nose by slamming her face into the hood of a car. One of Laura's friends reported the abuse to the police, but there was no record of any law enforcement action taken. Laura felt her complaint was ignored, even when she went to the police station with a broken nose. Laura wanted to end her relationship with David, but he sent her letters threatening to kill her if she tried. He was extremely possessive, believing that if she was not his, she did not deserve to live. Laura's mother did not know the full extent of David's cruelty, but tried to persuade her daughter to break up with him, feeling that their relationship was unhealthy. She suspected that jealousy may have been the motive behind the eventual murder. Laura was a year older than David, and he became increasingly jealous as she started college and moved to a school where she made new friends and socialized with other boys. The prosecutor's office reported that David was with Laura on the day of the attack, while she was on her way to her grandmother's house to swim. The attacker intended to lure her to a remote area to punish her for seeing another boy. There, they got into a fight, during which David wrestled her to the ground and pinned her down, using his body to restrain her. He then began hitting her on the head with whatever object he could find, which unfortunately included several large stones, causing the young girl to suffer serious injuries and die. In response, the defense argued that the genes found on Laura contained DNA from David, Laura, and an unidentified person, suggesting that David may have been framed. The attorney emphasized that David had criticized the police for bias during the investigation. David's brother testified on his behalf, providing a strong alibi. During cross-examination, police discovered that David's brother had been in contact with David while he was in prison. The brothers discussed ways to get David released, leading to the creation of an elaborate alibi that was exposed at the hearing. David Kyle Gilley was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. He is currently incarcerated, and his defense attorneys have filed multiple appeals against the verdict, all of which have been rejected. Initially, the murder of Laura Salmon did not attract significant public attention. 4 months after the horrific incident, the tragedy was widely reported in the media. The case sparked a national discussion about domestic violence. Since 1984, various measures have been taken to strengthen protections for women facing violence in their relationships. Hello everyone. Today we will learn about another case. The case of Joanna Yates. Joanna Yates was born on April 19, 1985, in the United Kingdom. Her friends and family called her Jo. She was the younger of 2 children, with an older brother. Joanna enjoyed a happy childhood in a loving home, as her parents were relatively wealthy and sent her to a private school. After graduating, she attended the Peter Simons College, where she studied landscape design and earned a diploma. This education helped her become a skilled professional in a field she had always dreamed of working in. By the end of 2010, at 25 years old, Joanna was thriving in her career. During this period, she was in a relationship with Greg Reardon, who was 27. Greg and Joanna had met in December 2008. Both Joanna and Greg were dedicated young professionals who prioritized achieving financial stability before considering marriage and children. In October 2010, Joanna received a job offer that marked a turning point in her life. With her solid professional qualifications, she was hired as a landscape designer at a promising company in Bristol. Everything seemed to align perfectly, allowing her to begin building her future. They started renting a ground-floor apartment in a private house in the city that same month. They quickly focused on their work. Joanna was known for her positivity, cheerfulness, and energy. With Christmas approaching, they excitedly prepared to celebrate in their new home. They decorated their apartment and bought gifts for their families, looking forward to the holiday. However, no one could have anticipated that this year's celebration would be marred by unexpected events. On the evening of December 17, 2010, Joanna was enjoying a drink with friends. Around 8 p.m., she left the pub to go home. She walked through the city center and stopped at a supermarket but didn't find anything she liked. So she went to another store where she bought 2 bottles of cider. After that, she entered Tesco Express and purchased a pizza. With her essentials in hand, Joanna headed to her apartment, arriving at 8:50 p.m. Once home, she turned on the oven to reheat the pizza while texting several colleagues about her evening plans. According to her colleagues, Joanna planned to spend the rest of the day alone since Greg was away for the entire weekend visiting relatives in another city. She shared with them her feelings of sadness about being alone, mentioned that she would keep herself busy with Christmas preparations, and planned to bake pies to share with her colleagues after the weekend. Greg returned home on Sunday afternoon, December 19, expecting to see Joanna, but she was not there. He found her handbag, keys, and other belongings that she usually kept at home. He also discovered her winter coat. When he called her, he only found her phone lying in the living room, which worried him the most because Joanna had left without her mobile phone. According to all information, Joanna should have been at home and not at work. Even if she had gone shopping or visiting someone, it was strange that she left without her coat, phone, and keys. Something didn't add up. He noticed that the cat hadn't been fed for a long time. It was clearly very hungry and practically lunged at the food. Greg suddenly realized that something must have happened to his girlfriend during the 2 days he had spent in another city. While he was away, Greg had repeatedly called and texted Joanna, but she ignored him. At first, he thought it might be due to network problem, but now he knows things are not that simple. He remembered that 2 days ago, Joanna was supposed to go to the pub with her colleagues. And since then, he hadn't heard from her. He reached out to her parents, friends, and colleagues, but no one knew where she was. That night, feeling frustrated and worried, Greg decided to go to the police station to report his girlfriend missing. Given the time that had passed, the police took the situation very seriously and quickly considered the possibility of abduction. They searched Joanna and Greg's apartment, but found no signs of violence or forced entry. It seemed that Joanna knew her abductor and had let him in willingly. It was likely that she had been attacked in the apartment. During the investigation, they found a receipt showing that Joanna had purchased pizza and 2 bottles of cider on the evening of December 17. One of the cider bottles was open, suggesting she had taken a few sips before something occurred. However, neither the pizza box nor the food itself was found. If Joanna had been attacked immediately with the intent to abduct her, or something worse, it was improbable that she would have had time to eat an entire pizza and throw away the box. Joanna had clearly gone missing, and it was concerning that she hadn't opened her advent calendar on December 17 and 18, even though she had been doing so every evening prior. On December 21, her boyfriend and family appeared on television, pleading for anyone with information about Joanna to come forward. Following this, news of her disappearance spread rapidly across the country. During this time, authorities focused on Joanna's close circle, particularly her boyfriend Greg, who had been away and could have used that as an alibi. However, he quickly proved he was with relatives in another city, clearing him as a suspect. Additionally, all signs indicated that their relationship was healthy, with no apparent motive for anyone to harm her. The police interviewed the tenants living on the first floor, which had 2 rented apartments, while the landlord lived on the second floor. They also questioned the landlord, who insisted he had not heard anything that evening and had not seen Joanna. The tenants on the first floor were a couple, Vincent Tabak, an engineer, and his girlfriend Tanya, an analyst. They were a respectable couple planning to marry soon. They mentioned that they did not know their neighbors well since they had only recently moved in and had not met them yet. On the night in question, Tanya was attending a corporate party, and Vincent picked her up at 2 a.m. He did not notice anything unusual that night. They had hosted a loud party on December 1 with music and heavy conversation. During the evening, they heard some loud female screams, but all the young partygoers were drunk and did not pay much attention. As the sounds quickly faded, it was unclear where they originated. However, they now thought those screams might be connected to their missing neighbor. At first, everyone was hopeful that Joanna would come home safely. However, as the days went by, their confidence began to fade. On December 25, 2010, a young couple was walking their dogs about 5 kilometers from Joanna's apartment in a remote area on the city's outskirts. They noticed something unusual sticking out from the snow by the roadside and thought it looked like clothing. Curious, they decided to investigate further and uncovered the body of a girl. They immediately contacted the police, and it was quickly confirmed that the deceased was 25-year-old Joanna, who had been missing since that weekend. Heavy snowfall had covered her body, which is why it had remained undiscovered for a week. Forensic experts who examined the scene quickly observed that the body was not only covered in snow, but also intentionally concealed under leaves and branches. This suggested that Joanna was not just a random victim of an accident. It appeared she had been deliberately hidden there. She was found wearing the same clothes she had on Friday evening, except for her coat, which was left in her apartment. Her t-shirt was raised, exposing her right breast, which could be related to the motive behind the attack. Although she was wearing warm socks, one sock was missing and could not be located. The police speculated that the absence of the sock might indicate that the killer took it as a trophy, a behavior sometimes seen in maniacs and serial offenders. A forensic examination revealed that the cause of death was asphyxiation. In addition to neck injuries, 43 other wounds were found on her body, including abrasions, deep scratches, and bruises from blunt force trauma. This evidence indicated that the victim had fought desperately for her life. Because she was discovered in the snow during cold weather, her body had not decomposed and remained in good condition. Notably, Joanna was found lying in a fetal position, suggesting that she had been intentionally placed there. The examination also showed that she had not eaten the pizza, indicating that she was attacked before she had the chance to do so. Interestingly, just a meter away from her body, blood was found on a concrete barrier, which was identified as belonging to Joanna. It appears that the killer initially intended to move her body over the barrier, but was unable to do so for some reason. This suggests that Joanna was killed in one location and that an attempt was made to hide her elsewhere. It also seemed that the perpetrator or perpetrators were startled and had to flee quickly. During the examination of Joanna's clothing, traces of semen from a man, likely the attacker, were discovered on her jeans, particularly near the zipper, indicating an abuse assault. As it became evident that the crime was particularly brutal, a large-scale operation was launched to locate the suspect. This investigation was set to be one of the largest ever undertaken by the police in this part of the UK, involving around 60 officers. They reached out to the public for assistance, initially offering a reward of £10,000 for information leading to the capture of the suspect, which was later raised to £60,000. Joanna's friends created a website and used social media to support the investigation. Meanwhile, detectives focused on examining Joanna's immediate social circle, looking for any potential enemies. Described as non-confrontational and mild-mannered, she had no known conflicts with anyone. The investigators gathered video footage from surveillance cameras located on the Clifton Suspension Bridge, which Joanna crossed on her way home from the pub, where she was last seen alive. Upon reviewing the footage, they found it to be of poor quality, yielding no suspicious activity. The detectives also considered the possibility that the suspect might have taken a different route over another bridge across the River Avon, situated a kilometer from Joanna's home, which could have avoided detection by the cameras. However, this theory remained unconfirmed. A man named Christopher Jeffries was the landlord of the apartment rented by Joanna. He had previously been a teacher but retired and now made his living from rental properties. People described him as quiet, very intelligent, and somewhat eccentric. Before these events, no one suspected he could be involved in anything serious. His unusual behavior was never perceived as a threat. The police spoke to Christopher again about the night of December 17. He stated that he went to the gym to work out that evening and returned to his apartment around 9 p.m., not leaving again afterward. This timing matched when Joanna was believed to have come home. Christopher insisted that he did not see or hear anything suspicious that night and did not hear any of the female screams reported by party attendees. His alibi was weak because he lived alone, with no one to support his claim. However, concerns grew due to the inconsistencies in his story when he spoke with detectives again. He suddenly mentioned seeing a few unfamiliar young men near Joanna's home just before her return, describing them as suspicious. He could not see them clearly, and this addition to his story was met with great skepticism. Joanna's landlord became the primary suspect. Distrust intensified when Greg informed the police that Mr. Christopher had helped him jump-start his car on the morning of December 17, just before he left town. Greg clearly recalled saying he was leaving for the weekend and was worried about his girlfriend being alone. Naturally, a perpetrator might have seen this as a convenient opportunity to attack. The police had not yet confirmed their suspicions, but somehow journalists discovered that Christopher Jeffries was the main suspect. Reporters began to chase him in the streets, forcing Christopher to stay home almost all the time to avoid them. The situation deteriorated further when various rumors about him started appearing in the newspapers. He expressed that he was close to a nervous breakdown and felt unsafe. Whenever he went outside, he was openly called a criminal, with fabricated stories about child abuse during his teaching career. On December 30, 2010, the police arrested Christopher and subjected him to harsh interrogation. Despite this, he firmly maintained that he had no involvement in the murder. At that point, authorities did not have enough evidence to charge him in court. However, later, Vincent, another tenant living in Mr. Christopher's house, came to the police station. He suddenly remembered that on the night of the incident, he had left the house twice and saw the landlord's car parked in the driveway both times, first in the early evening and again later when he went out to find his girlfriend. Vincent noted that the car was facing the opposite direction the second time, suggesting it had been driven somewhere that night, which contradicted Christopher's claim that he hadn't gone anywhere. During the search of Christopher's apartment, police discovered a pair of sneakers with small stains that looked like blood. These items were sent to the lab for testing, but the analysis would take time. Under UK law, police can only hold a suspect for 24 hours if there is not enough evidence to make an arrest. After one day, they must either release the suspect or go to court to request more time for custody. In this case, the police chose to extend Christopher's detention because they needed more time to analyze the evidence and formally document witness Vincent's statement. Despite the extension, the police could not establish Christopher's involvement in the crime. The stains on the sneakers were too small to obtain a DNA profile with the technology available at that time. After testing, the lab returned the sneakers, stating that it was impossible to extract DNA or determine the source of the stains. Even so, this did not lead to Christopher's release. The male DNA found on Joanna's body and clothing did not match his profile. On January 1, 2011, during a holiday, Christopher was released without charges, which was a relief for him. However, the media continued to pursue him. The investigation had a promising lead in Vincent Tabak, who altered information in his testimony. He had no alibi at the time of the crime, making him a new suspect. The police believed he might have tried to frame the landlord in an attempt to mislead the investigation. suspicion towards Vincent grew stronger after he called the police station to explain how Christopher's car had moved while he was in the Netherlands. It was puzzling why Vincent hadn't mentioned this detail earlier. To obtain an official statement from him, several police officers visited him on December 31, 2010. During the questioning, they noticed that Vincent acted strangely. He was vague in some parts of his story, but gave very detailed answers in others, almost as if he had rehearsed them. These inconsistencies raised red flags for the experienced officers, who noticed that he was carefully considering his answers and managing the information he shared. The most suspicious detail was the unexplained scratches on his hands. He insisted he didn't know Joanna at all, claiming he had only moved into the apartment a week before the incident. When asked to provide fingerprints and DNA samples, he hesitated and explained that he had been in the neighboring apartment with the landlord while Joanna was away, which might have accidentally left his DNA. Vincent took a long time to agree to provide the samples for comparison. His profile showed a partial match with the DNA found on the body of Joanna, but there was a significant issue. A quality DNA sample from Joanna could not be obtained because she had been lying by the roadside in the snow for a week, which exposed her body to the elements. As a result, the samples were badly damaged and contaminated, meaning that even a partial match with Vincent could not definitively prove he was the murderer. Nonetheless, this information raised serious suspicions in the police investigation, prompting the authorities to investigate Vincent's background more thoroughly. Vincent Tabak was born on February 10, 1978. At the time of Joanna's murder, he was 32 years old. He was originally from the Netherlands and was the youngest of 5 children. As a child, Vincent was quiet and shy, more introverted than many of his peers, but he was also very intelligent and ambitious. In 2003, he graduated from a technological university in the Netherlands with a master's degree in landscape design, a field he shared with Joanna and hoped to pursue further. In 2007, Vincent moved to the United Kingdom and began working as an engineer. That same year, he met Tanya, and they later moved to Bristol, renting an apartment in the house of Christopher. The landlord had a positive impression of him, as Vincent was calm, friendly, and had no criminal record, which convinced Christopher to provide him with housing. On January 20, 2011, 32-year-old Vincent Tabak was arrested on suspicion of murder. He consistently denied his guilt and maintained his original story. However, during multiple meetings with detectives, he repeatedly changed his statements, adding new details. Initially, he claimed he had stayed home that evening until leaving to pick up his girlfriend Tanya at 2 a.m. Later, he claimed that he had actually left the house twice that night to take photographs and go to the supermarket. Vincent was insistent only in his statement that he did not kill Joanna. It became clear that he was lying and trying to evade responsibility. The police identified the car Vincent was driving and scrutinized footage from street surveillance cameras to track the routes the murderer might have taken when disposing of the victim. Detectives were not surprised to find Vincent's car appearing along nearly the entire route. The car was seized and examined. Numerous pink fibers, matching those found on Joanna's clothing, were discovered in the trunk. These fibers were mixed with fibers from Vincent's own clothing. The most significant evidence found by forensic specialists was blood stains in the trunk. Testing revealed that this blood also belonged to Joanna. It was clear that the perpetrator had attempted to clean the car of any evidence. There was a strong smell of cleaning products, but he had not done a thorough job. Detectives confiscated Vincent's laptop and mobile phone for examination. The analysis showed that his attack had been driven by abuse desire from the start. The laptop contained numerous images and videos, along with browser searches for depraved content. Vincent preferred methods such as strangulation and beatings, which aligned with how Joanna was murdered. He was also a regular visitor to escort websites and met escort in person. It came to light that Vincent was living a double life. he appeared to be a decent man and Tanya's fiancé, while privately, he harbored dark secrets. After the murder, a large number of search queries were discovered that revealed Vincent was looking for information about Joanna. He was closely monitoring the investigation, and detectives observed a troubling detail. After checking the progress regarding Joanna's death, Vincent seemed to take pleasure in reliving his actions. This behavior indicated that he could be a potential serial killer, likely to kill again once the thrill of his past victim faded. The investigation uncovered incriminating evidence, including searches related to murder and the decomposition of human bodies. On January 22, 2011, Vincent Tabak was charged with first-degree murder. Although he initially denied his involvement, he later confessed, but insisted that he never intended to kill Joanna. He claimed his actions were accidental and not premeditated. In October 2011, hearings commenced. However, the judge prohibited the prosecution from using the defendant's obsession with violent and abuse content as evidence. In court, Vincent chose to represent himself and delivered his final statement. He recounted that on the evening of December 17, 2010, he was alone in his apartment since his girlfriend had gone to a Christmas party with her colleagues. When he returned from the store, he noticed his neighbor, Joanna, waving at him from her window and inviting him inside. Once inside, Joanna offered him some cider. Vincent misinterpreted her welcoming gesture and believed it indicated a desire for intimacy, which led him to kiss her suddenly. Joanna reacted immediately by screaming and pushing him away. In a state of panic, Vincent covered her mouth and wrapped his hands around her neck in an attempt to silence her. He claimed he held his hand on her neck for about 20 seconds before realizing that Joanna was no longer alive. Vincent insisted that there was no abuse motive behind his actions, viewing it merely as a misunderstanding and a tragic accident. In court, the defendant pretended to feel remorse, but it seemed insincere. The prosecution argued that his version of events was just another lie, especially since it did not account for the 43 injuries the victim had sustained. Joanna even had a broken nose, which suggested a lengthy struggle and significant force. The prosecution believed that the 20 seconds of strangulation he described was far too short. They thought he had been observing her for a long time and intentionally entered her apartment that night when he knew she would be alone, likely after overhearing a conversation between Greg and Christopher. It appeared that Vincent had long-standing feelings for Joanna and knew her better than he let on. He had initially intended to abuse and kill her, as shown by his fetishes for strangling women. Being a strong young man, he easily overpowered Joanna, who was 30 centimeters shorter than him, and he used his full weight against her during the struggle. She sustained injuries to her head, neck, torso, and arms, indicating that the fight was drawn out, and her death was slow and painful. He continued to put himself in a compromising situation after the crime by taking the victim's pizza. This is the only reason why neither the pizza box nor its contents were found, even though the receipt was found in the apartment. It's possible that blood or his fingerprints were on the box, prompting him to throw it away along with the food. At 9:25 p.m., Vincent texted his girlfriend Tanya, claiming he was bored at home without her. This was an obvious attempt to create an alibi while he was far from bored at that moment. After sending the message, Vincent loaded the victim's body into his car trunk, stopped at a store to buy beer and chips, and then drove to a different location to dispose of the body. The prosecution reiterated to the jury that Vincent Tabak was a dangerous criminal who could not be trusted. On October 26, 2011, during the closing arguments, the jury began their deliberations, which lasted for 2 full days. On October 28, they returned with a verdict, finding Vincent Tabak guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum term of 20 years. However, his legal troubles did not end there. In March 2015, he was charged with possessing child abuse. With 145 illegal images found on his laptop, he pleaded guilty once more and received an additional 10-month sentence. Following Vincent's conviction, Christopher Jeffries sought justice for the damages he had incurred. He filed defamation claims against several newspapers for harming his reputation. These publications, which had published 8 articles about the case, eventually apologized to Christopher. As a result, they were ordered to pay significant financial compensation for the reputational and moral damages caused. In 2014, ITV releasing a 2-part series titled The Lost Honor of Christopher Jeffries. This series focuses on the former teacher who was affected by the murder of a girl who had rented an apartment from him. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Dustin Duthie. Dustin Duthie grew up in a large family, with both biological and half-siblings from his mother's and stepfather's previous marriages. His mother, Shawn Boshuk, separated from his biological father when Dustin was 3 years old. Despite this, his stepfather, Alan Penny Legion, became a loving and supportive father figure. Dustin was especially close to his younger half-brother, Adam. From a young age, Dustin was recognized as being very intelligent, and his family had high expectations for his future. They believed he would achieve great things. However, as Dustin grew older, he often argued and fought with his relatives, and these conflicts frequently escalated from verbal disagreements to physical altercations. Although his family tried to help him manage his anger, it became clear that Dustin struggled to control his emotions. His arguments became increasingly violent, and he began throwing objects at others as a way to release his frustration. Over time, his parents began to tolerate his behavior and often gave in to his demands to avoid further conflict. This approach allowed Dustin to manipulate his family, especially his mother, Shawn, who frequently gave in to him. His manipulative and violent tendencies continued throughout his teenage years. Dustin's behavior eventually led to legal trouble. At the age of 16, he was arrested for the first time after breaking into his school with friends. Together, they vandalized the vice principal's office, smashed a vending machine with a stolen golf club, and stole various items. Despite this incident, Dustin showed no signs of changing his behavior. As Dustin grew older, he became a burden to his family, causing pain and frustration for his parents. His rude and aggressive behavior did not improve with age. In an attempt to control his anger, Dustin took boxing classes, but this effort proved unsuccessful. Adam experienced this firsthand during a training session when Dustin's aggression led to illegal strikes that violated the rules of boxing. Fortunately, the coach intervened before Dustin could harm his younger brother. That day, Adam truly understood how dangerous his brother was. The only person who could stand up to Dustin was their stepfather, Alan, which caused tension between the two. During his teenage years, Dustin had many friends and even a few girlfriends. As both Adam and Dustin entered adulthood, they actively pursued relationships. During this time, Adam met and fell in love with a girl named Taylor Toller. However, tensions arose when Adam noticed Taylor growing closer to Dustin, leading to a minor conflict between the two brothers. Adam found out that Taylor and Dustin were dating. Although he felt sad about it, he chose to accept and support their relationship. When Taylor began dating Dustin, she was 20 years old. Taylor, the only daughter in her family, had grown up happily, surrounded by loved ones and many friends. After graduating from high school, Taylor's gentle and kind nature led her to feel drawn to working with children. In contrast, Dustin was very different from Taylor. He often communicated in a rough and abrasive manner, even with her. Their relationship was frequently tense and filled with conflict. Taylor and Dustin's friends noticed that the couple constantly argued. Despite this, Taylor did not leave Dustin. Perhaps she believed he would eventually change, or that she could help him improve. Their complicated relationship dragged on for years, but Dustin's inability to control his anger only made things worse. The situation became even more strained due to frequent arguments with Dustin's family. These conflicts escalated to the point where Dustin physically assaulted his younger brother, Adam, and his stepfather, Alan. Boxing played a significant role in shaping Dustin's behavior. Whenever he felt angry, frustrated, or dissatisfied, he would hit the gym and train harder. It was during this time that Dustin began using steroids. Steroids are widely known to cause side effects such as anger, irritability, and aggressive behavior. Dustin's friends and family repeatedly urged him to stop using the drugs and even suggested that he seek professional help, but he ignored their advice. In the weeks and months that followed, his anger issues worsened. At one point, Dustin attempted to attack his stepfather, Alan, with a metal bar. At family dinners, threats and yelling became commonplace. One evening, however, Dustin's behavior became so unbearable that he was asked to leave. He stood up, walked toward the door, but before leaving, he turned back to his family and said, "You will get what you deserve," before storming out. The family had grown accustomed to Dustin's behavior. These behaviors had become a regular part of their lives. At the time, no one truly believed he would act on any of his threats. However, years of unchecked behavior and lack of intervention were about to take their toll. Everything would come to a head in the summer of 2018. On the morning of Tuesday, July 31, 2018, Adam began his day as usual with a cup of coffee. While sipping his coffee, he realized he hadn't heard from his brother Dustin or the rest of the family in days. Feeling concerned, Adam tried calling Dustin, but his calls went straight to voicemail. He continued trying to reach his brother, but all attempts were unsuccessful. Before he could dwell on it further, Adam received a surprise call from the police. They asked to meet him at his home to discuss an urgent matter. When Adam pressed for details, the officer explained that it was not something they could discuss over the phone. When the police arrived, they shared news that would change Adam's life forever. They informed him about a phone call Dustin had made to the police. During the call, Dustin confessed to killing his girlfriend a week earlier, as well as his stepfather and mother. According to the police, Dustin had been sitting downstairs with a knife and a bottle of whiskey, unable to bring himself to go upstairs and face what he had done. The police rushed to Taylor's home in Elmwood Park, where they discovered her body. Dustin was arrested shortly after making the call and did not resist arrest. Forensic evidence and Dustin's confession revealed that Taylor had been killed 5 days before Dustin murdered his parents. Taylor's body was found in her bed. According to Dustin, the two had argued and fought throughout the night. At around 3 a.m., he strangled her. However, the actual cause of death was determined to be a deep cut to her throat. After her death, Dustin pulled the covers up to her chin. 2 hours later, at around 5 a.m., Dustin left Taylor's apartment and returned to his parents' house, trying to suppress the memory of what he had done. Incredibly, he attempted to act as if nothing had happened for the next few days. The situation changed when Taylor's parents called Dustin's parents. Taylor had been the one in regular contact with her family, so her sudden silence raised concerns. The call alarmed Dustin's parents, who had known Taylor for over 5 years. During this time, Dustin's parents repeatedly tried to get him to talk, suspecting that he might know something about Taylor's disappearance. Despite their persistence, Dustin insisted that he knew nothing. Dustin claimed that he had spoken to Taylor 3 days before her disappearance, but maintained that he had no idea what might have happened to her. However, his parents seemed to believe he was hiding something, and their constant questioning made Dustin realize that the truth would soon come out. Feeling desperate, he concluded that the only way to keep Taylor's disappearance a secret was to make his parents disappear as well. While contemplating how to carry out his plan, Dustin was in the kitchen with his mother, who was sitting at the table sorting some papers. At that moment, he once again lost control of his actions. According to the police report, Dustin's mother, Shawn, had been attacked with a knife, and her body was dragged across the kitchen floor in an attempt to hide it. His stepfather, Alan, was also murdered by Dustin, suffering multiple stab wounds. Both bodies were placed under a plastic tarp, and the surrounding area was hastily cleaned. During the investigation, police discovered a pile of hair in the bathroom. They later determined that Dustin had shaved his head to alter his appearance, possibly in an attempt to escape and hide. However, he ultimately failed to follow through with this plan. After killing his parents, Dustin drove to Taylor's apartment, but was unable to get inside because he had lost the remote control key. Frustrated, he drank whiskey, smoked cigarettes, and pondered his next move. With nowhere to go, no way to dispose of the body, and no plan to cover his tracks, Dustin decided to call 911. Initially, he was incoherent, appearing confused and uncertain about his actions. The experienced police officers kept him talking instead of ending the call, encouraging him to share more details. Dustin eventually confessed to killing his parents earlier that day. The police redirected the conversation, asking about his condition, whether he had been drinking, and whether he had a weapon. They stayed on the line, urging him to surrender peacefully and without resistance. Meanwhile, officers were dispatched to arrest him. Although the investigation appeared straightforward, it took police more than 2 years to gather and analyze all the evidence needed to present the case in court. It was determined that Taylor had been killed in the early morning hours of July 26, 2018. Surveillance camera footage showed Dustin and Taylor entering and leaving the apartment at different times, sometimes holding hands. The evening before the murder, Taylor was seen returning to the apartment alone, visibly upset and crying. The couple was later seen having an emotional discussion. At 5:15 a.m., Dustin was seen leaving the apartment alone, carrying a large box. He then removed the box and a black bag from his car. Inside the box is Taylor's towel. After Dustin was arrested, he was taken to a local hospital for observation because he appeared to be mentally unstable. After undergoing evaluations, he was determined to be mentally competent to stand trial. A key piece of evidence was later discovered by Dustin's younger brother in the back seat of Alan's car. It was a letter torn into small pieces, crumpled, and wrapped in duct tape. Experts painstakingly reconstructed the letter, which turned out to be Dustin's confession. In it, he described his thoughts and feelings after killing Taylor, admitting that he had always been curious about what it felt like to kill someone and to feel someone's soul leave their body. How this letter ended up in his stepfather's car remains a mystery, but it played an important role in building Dustin's psychological profile. A psychological evaluation determined that Dustin was suffering from a mental disorder at the time of the crimes. However, the disorder was caused by his use of illegal drugs and steroids, which impaired his ability to understand the nature, consequences, and illegality of his actions. The findings, evidence, and confessions of Dustin built a strong case against him. 3 years after the murders of Taylor Toller, Shawn Boshuk, and Alan Penny Legion, Dustin Duthie's trial began. However, just 3 days before the trial, Dustin pleaded guilty to all 3 counts, bringing the case to a close. Dustin Duthie was convicted of second-degree murder for the deaths of his mother, Taylor, and Shawn, as well as first-degree murder for the murder of his stepfather, Alan. During the trial, several people testified, including Dustin's grandmother and siblings, who shared the pain of losing their mother and stepfather. Many others present in court spoke in support of Taylor. Taylor's mother emotionally stated that their family had been a close-knit one, and now they live with nightmares and trauma. They will never forgive Dustin for taking their daughter's life. Dustin was also given the opportunity to speak. He said that he would not ask for forgiveness because he knew what he had done was unforgivable. If he could sacrifice his life to bring back those 3 beautiful souls, he would do it. The prosecution emphasized that Dustin killed his mother and stepfather while sober, By law, Dustin was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 35 years. The sentence includes 25 years for the murders of his stepfather, Alan, and his mother, Shawn, as well as an additional 10 years for the murder of his girlfriend, Taylor. While the loss is irreparable, the family feels that justice has been served and that Dustin will face the consequences of his actions. The deaths of Shawn and Alan have had a profound impact on their children. One of their sons, Adam, has said that the loss of his parents shattered his dream of pursuing a football career. Another son has expressed his grief over Dustin's actions. Shawn and Alan were loving, supportive parents who gave Dustin many opportunities to turn his life around and stood by him and their other children. It is a great tragedy that such a betrayal came from their own son. Although Dustin has apologized and could be eligible for parole after 35 years, many believe he should stay behind bars for life. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Jennifer Clark. Donald Clark, 40, and Jennifer Clark, 30, are a married couple living in the small town of Zebulon, Georgia, USA. For a time, their life together seemed happy. They have 2 sons together, and Donald also has an adult daughter from a previous relationship. Donald and Jennifer met in 1996 when Jennifer was 18. Despite a 10-year age gap, they quickly connected and got married in 1997. The following year, they welcomed their first son, and 2 years later, their second son was born. The family settled in Zebulon, a quiet rural town. Donald has always been a hardworking man. He dropped out of high school and started working immediately at a local factory. Over time, he pursued further education and advanced his career within the same company. Jennifer, on the other hand, worked as a nurse at a nursing home. Like any marriage, their relationship seemed harmonious at first. However, after the birth of their children, things began to change. Donald's daughter noticed that Jennifer was increasingly critical of him. When Donald's daughter became old enough, she decided to move out of the house. She chose to live with her grandparents due to Jennifer's erratic behavior. Unable to wait until adulthood to leave, she moved out early to escape the conflicts caused by her stepmother. For a while, Donald's daughter lived in Florida, but at 19, she became pregnant. She decided to move back in with her father for support. During this time, Jennifer and Donald appeared to be rebuilding their relationship. However, by the time the baby was born, Donald's daughter noticed that her father's relationship with Jennifer had deteriorated again. As before, the house was filled with arguments, and Jennifer continued to pressure and humiliate Donald. Once again, Donald's daughter was forced to move out. Many people advised Donald to end the marriage, but he hesitated because he appreciated Jennifer's housekeeping skills and her role in their daily lives. In early 2008, the couple moved into a new home in the same town. Around the same time, Michael Yost, the 22-year-old son of Donald's best friend Charlie, moved in with them. Michael had serious legal problems, had dropped out of school, and had begun using illegal drugs, which led to more charges and increased police surveillance. Hoping to help Michael turn his life around, Donald invited him to live with them. Jennifer quickly became close to Michael, which soon aroused Donald's suspicions. Eventually, Donald directly asked Michael if he was having an affair with Jennifer. Michael admitted to the affair. This revelation did not seem to surprise Donald, as Jennifer had been unfaithful to him on several previous occasions. Despite her repeated infidelity, Donald always forgave Jennifer, hoping to keep their marriage intact for the sake of their children. After learning about the affair, Donald asked Michael to move out of their home. Donald began to wonder what more he could do to make his wife happy. He provided for her and their children, was a loving husband, and a devoted father. However, it became clear to everyone that the problem was not Donald, but Jennifer. Donald decided to have an honest conversation with Jennifer about their problems. They finally came to the conclusion that it was time to separate. Over the next few days, they thought it over and ultimately agreed that divorce was the best decision. Everything seemed normal, with no signs of trouble. However, on the night of March 7, Donald woke up to find a sheet covering his face. He quickly threw the sheet off and was nearly hit in the head with a baseball bat that his wife Jennifer was holding. Donald immediately called the police to report his wife's unprovoked aggressive behavior. However, when the police arrived, he calmed down and decided he didn't want Jennifer to face legal consequences, so he withdrew the complaint. The incident, nonetheless, left an impression on the police. The next day, Donald went to court and filed for divorce. Jennifer left the house and moved in with Michael. At the time, Michael was living with his grandmother. Jennifer moved in with him, leaving the children in Donald's care. The breakup seemed to work out for everyone. During this time, Donald's friends noticed that he began to do much better. Eventually, life started to improve for him. Meanwhile, Jennifer told her family about her new relationship with Michael, and they were harshly critical. Her mother called it the stupidest decision she had ever made, claiming that Jennifer had left a wonderful husband and family for someone who wasn't worth it. By the spring of 2008, Donald and Jennifer had separated, but were still not divorced. During this time, Donald focused on his work and devoted all of his free time to caring for their two sons. Raising the boys alone was a challenge for him, so he decided to hire a live-in nanny. The nanny, Danielle Young, was a single mother in her 20s with two children from previous failed relationships. Donald met Danielle at a bar shortly after his separation. She immediately caught his attention, and they spent the evening talking. A few weeks later, Donald offered her a position as a babysitter for his children. Their relationship soon developed into a romantic one. During this time, unexpected problems arose. Jennifer discovered she was pregnant, but couldn't be sure whether the father was Donald or Michael. A DNA test was required to determine paternity. Jennifer decided to share the news with Donald. She went to his home, unaware that he had hired Danielle as a babysitter. Despite their separation, Jennifer became enraged when she saw another woman in the house. She stormed in, causing a scene, screaming and arguing. She then grabbed a baseball bat, threatened to harm Donald, and left the house. Danielle was shocked by the events that unfolded. She feared not only for her own safety, but also for the safety of her children. She became convinced that Jennifer was a threat to her sons. During the summer, Danielle decided to move away from Donald, partly because of their 17-year age gap. Meanwhile, Jennifer and Donald's divorce was finalized in July 2008. At the same time, a paternity test revealed that the child Jennifer was carrying was actually Michael's. Living conditions at Michael's grandmother's house were poor. Unfortunately, neither Jennifer nor Michael could afford to move out. A few months later, the couple moved into Donald's sister's house. She is very close to Donald and was surprised when he asked her to let Jennifer and Michael stay with. However, she agreed to help. Donald was likely trying to reconcile with Jennifer. He kept insisting that the boys needed a mother and repeatedly tried to convince her to reunite and rebuild the family. However, Jennifer continued to refuse until October 2008. She eventually agreed to Donald's proposal and decided to return. She had come to realize that Michael was a failure. As both a husband and a father, he did not work, had no money, and their family lived in poverty. This ultimately led her to return to Donald. After her return, Jennifer resumed managing the household, taking care of the children, and handling daily responsibilities. Donald continued to work hard and spent his free time with his sons. Notably, he even accepted Jennifer's unborn child with Michael as his own and planned to raise the child as part of the family. Despite their reconciliation, It was evident to everyone that the couple's relationship was extremely toxic and even worse than it had been before the divorce. Nevertheless, Donald stubbornly clung to the illusion of a happy family life. Meanwhile, Michael came home from work to find Jennifer gone. She had left, taking all her belongings without saying a word. Later, Michael discovered that she had returned to her ex-husband, Donald. This devastated him, as he had been confident in the life they were building together and had even planned their future. In desperation, Michael begged her to come back. The situation became tense and unpredictable, with the potential to spiral out of control at any moment. On November 19, 2008, just before Thanksgiving, Donald's sister began to worry about him, as she had not heard from him for several days. While this might not have been a concern for most people, it was unusual for Donald, who was always in constant contact with his family. His complete silence raised red flags. Unable to reach him directly, she contacted Jennifer, who claimed she had no idea where Donald was. Following their conversation, Donald's sister went to the police to report him missing. Officers visited Donald's home and spoke with Jennifer. She explained that she had last seen him the previous night and had not noticed anything unusual. According to Jennifer, Donald had come home after work, had dinner, watched TV, and gone to bed. The next morning, he left for work as usual. Jennifer claimed they had exchanged text messages during his shift while she was taking the kids to school. Donald had read and responded to her messages. She then spent the rest of the day doing chores. But Donald did not return home at his usual time. She said she had no idea where he could be, and noted that his phone, wallet, papers, and car were all missing. Jennifer speculated that he might have run away. Donald's sister, however, strongly disagreed. She believed that such behavior was completely out of character for Donald. She knew he had done everything he could to make the relationship work, that he always put his family first, and that he would never consider running away. While gathering more information, Donald's sister discovered that he had been seeing a woman named Danielle. This revelation shifted the police's focus. They began to consider the possibility that Donald had left to escape his toxic relationship with Jennifer and was now with Danielle. Based on these details, the police concluded that Donald might have left to pursue happiness and would eventually return. Donald's sister refused to give up. She printed flyers and distributed them widely. Although the search yielded no results, it prompted the police to take further action. They noted that Donald had not committed any crimes or made any bank transactions since his disappearance. Additionally, his cell phone had not been used. These details led the police to suspect that he had not simply run away. Police began piecing together a timeline of events from the day he went missing. However, witness testimonies were inconsistent, making it impossible to determine the exact time of his disappearance. Donald's boss shared an intriguing story about him. According to the boss, Donald was determined to repair his relationship with Danielle. However, he discovered that Danielle was pregnant with another man's child. Although her relationship with the baby's father had ended, Danielle chose to keep the baby and was navigating the challenges of motherhood. Donald, who often confided in his boss, revealed just days before his disappearance that he wanted to end his toxic relationship with Jennifer and was considering starting a family with Danielle. Donald's sudden disappearance left his workplace baffled. He stopped showing up to work, didn't contact anyone, and ignored all attempts to reach him. This behavior was completely out of character for Donald, who was known for being responsible and punctual. He had recently been promoted and was putting more effort into his job, making it hard to believe he would abandon everything without explanation. Hoping to find Donald safe, the police went to Danielle's house. However, Danielle told them she hadn't seen or been able to contact him. She became very distressed when the police informed her of his disappearance. Danielle confirmed that both she and Donald had wanted to reconcile and that she had been waiting for him. She fully cooperated with the investigation, providing an alibi that was verified, ruling her out as a suspect. The police explored various scenarios to uncover a motive for Donald's disappearance, but found no explanation or trace of him. As time passed, the likelihood of finding him alive grew slim. On November 25, 2008, Jennifer gave birth to a son. Around the same time, the police obtained a search warrant for Donald's home. What they found in the master bedroom was disturbing. The room smelled strongly of cleaning products, and the bed appeared unusually clean, as though it had been scrubbed with a strong solution. The mattress and sheets were brand new, and the wall behind the headboard had also been scrubbed. However, only certain areas of the room had been cleaned. The wallpaper on one wall was noticeably faded and white, in stark contrast to the rest of the room, which was dusty and cluttered. Jennifer claimed she had cleaned the room to prepare for her son's birth, but her explanation didn't add up. Only one wall had been cleaned, while the rest of the house remained messy. Forensic experts examined the scene and found microscopic drops of blood. When questioned, Jennifer admitted there might be blood in the room, explaining that her 3 young children often fought and could have injured themselves, causing nosebleeds. She claimed her cleaning efforts were simply part of maintaining the room. However, her explanation raised doubts. Why had she focused on cleaning just one wall while leaving the rest of the house untouched? It seemed clear she had attempted to hide evidence and was now trying to mislead the investigation. Despite their suspicions, the police couldn't get Jennifer to confess. The police decided to question her children, who provided important details about the night Donald went missing. The teens mentioned that their mother had slept in the bedroom with their father that night. Later, they were awakened by the sound of someone running on the first floor. When they got up to investigate, they discovered that the back door of the house was wide open, which was unusual for their family. The children admitted they did not fully understand what had happened. Their mother, Jennifer, avoided discussing the incident. However, their testimony supported Jennifer's alibi, suggesting that she was unlikely to be involved in Donald's disappearance. The police then shifted their focus to other suspects, particularly Michael. He had a clear motive, as his girlfriend Jennifer had recently reconciled with Donald, her ex-husband. Several neighbors reported seeing Michael's pickup truck near Donald's house that evening. Michael was arrested and questioned, but the police obtained no useful information from him. He was later released, though he remained the prime suspect in the case. A significant breakthrough in the investigation occurred on December 23, when a random witness contacted the police station to report an unusual discovery. While walking his dog, the witness noticed the animal chewing on something. Upon closer inspection, he realized it was a wallet containing Donald's ID. Authorities quickly responded and noted that the discovery site was near Michael's mother's house. This prompted the police to conduct a thorough search of the surrounding area. During their search, they found a baseball bat and several other items along the road. Based on these findings, the investigation was expanded to include the area near Michael's mother's home. A nearby field drew the attention of the police. After approximately an hour of searching through bushes, police found a camouflage tarp concealed beneath layers of leaves and branches. Something was wrapped inside. When they opened it, they discovered a body, its head encased in a plastic bag, wrapped in the tarp. Tattoos on the body allowed police to identify it as Donald Clark. The cause of death was determined to be multiple blunt force traumas to the head. One detail stood out to investigators: Donald was wearing pajamas. This finding contradicted Jennifer's earlier claim that Donald had gone to work. It appeared that he had been killed while sleeping in bed. Michael and Jennifer were preparing to celebrate Christmas together when police arrested them. Jennifer showed no signs of grief over her ex-husband's death and seemed content with her life with Michael. However, during a subsequent interrogation, Jennifer completely changed her story. She admitted that she had initially been sleeping in the same bed with Donald on the morning he went missing. At some point, Jennifer claimed, she awoke to find Michael standing over Donald, holding something in his hand. Terrified, Jennifer panicked and ran to her son's room, locking the door from the inside. The commotion woke the children, and from inside the locked room, Jennifer said she could hear Michael beating Donald to death with a baseball bat. After the attack, Jennifer claimed that Michael knocked on the bedroom door and demanded her help cleaning the scene. She stated that she complied out of fear for her own safety, believing she might be his next victim. Jennifer accused Michael of being a manipulative and abusive person who had kept her under oppressive control. She admitted that they cleaned the bedroom walls with bleach and replaced the blood-stained sheets and mattress with new ones. Jennifer said she later helped Michael carry Donald's body to the car, where Michael wrapped Donald's head in a plastic bag to minimize the amount of blood left at the crime scene. Michael, however, provided a completely different account. He denied Jennifer's allegations and claimed that she had never truly ended their relationship. According to Michael, Jennifer wanted to reconcile with Donald only to obtain financial benefits from him. He maintained that he and Jennifer were still seeing each other regularly and stated that, on the night of the murder, Jennifer called him around 1 a.m., asking to meet for intimacy. Michael alleged that Jennifer used a flashlight to signal him when he arrived at the house, indicating it was safe to enter. She supposedly assured Michael that Donald would not be home. However, when Michael entered the house, he claimed he found Donald asleep in the bedroom. Jennifer took an aluminum baseball bat from the closet and repeatedly struck Donald in the head. She then begged Michael to help dispose of the body and clean up the blood. Feeling he had no choice, Michael agreed. He later claimed that Jennifer was a dangerous manipulator who had controlled him throughout their relationship. Michael admitted to helping move the body out of town and scattering Donald's belongings in various locations. However, he kept Donald's cell phone. They used it to send text messages to Jennifer, pretending Donald was still alive. After conflicting interviews, both were arrested and charged with the premeditated murder of Donald Clark. Police believed they had planned the crime together. Michael was also charged with planting evidence to mislead the investigation. Jennifer's lawyers immediately contested the charges, arguing that she was 9 months pregnant at the time and unlikely to have beaten a grown man to death without assistance. Facing the possibility of the death penalty, Michael opted for a plea bargain with the prosecution. He admitted to complicity in planning the murder, destroying evidence, and obstructing the investigation. In exchange for his testimony against Jennifer, he received a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 30 years. The trial, delayed several times, finally began on January 31, 2011. The prosecution's star witness was Michael. He testified that on the night of the murder, Jennifer had called him, saying she wanted to leave Donald. Michael initially refused to help. Later, Jennifer called again, saying she had packed her bags and needed to be picked up. When Michael arrived, Jennifer attacked Donald and killed him with a baseball bat. Michael also revealed that Jennifer had threatened to cut ties with him if he didn't help cover up the crime and dispose of the body, which prompted his involvement. Several witnesses described Jennifer as argumentative and confrontational. After less than an hour of deliberation, the jury found Jennifer Clark guilty on all counts, including murder and tampering with evidence. She was sentenced to life in prison plus 60 years. Both defendants are currently serving sentences in state prisons. All of Jennifer's appeals have been denied. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Christa Waninger. On May 2, 1963, a tragic event occurred on Via Emilia in Rome when police were called to an apartment building after witnesses reported finding an injured girl. 2 police officers arrived at the apartment building and went up to the 4th floor. In the hallway between apartments 14 and 15, they discovered a blonde woman in a blue coat lying unconscious in a large pool of blood, her eyes wide with horror. Several people had gathered around her, including a shocked janitor and a young neighbor who worked at a medical center. The neighbor checked the victim's pulse, performed CPR, and did everything she could to keep the girl alive until an ambulance arrived. One of the neighbors called an ambulance, but by the time it arrived, it was too late. The girl was dead. The victim was identified as Krista Waninger, 23. She had come to Rome in search of success and fame, but tragically, she had been fatally stabbed 7 times. The police immediately began questioning neighbors and witnesses to piece together what had happened. However, no one had witnessed the attack, not even the residents of apartments 14 and 15. The police knocked on the doors of both apartments, and Gerda Hodap came out. When asked by the police about Krista, she stated that they were friends. They had planned to meet, but Krista was attacked and stabbed just steps away from Gerda's apartment. The attack occurred at 2:50 p.m., and Gerda claimed that she had been taking a nap and had not heard anything unusual. While Krista was brutally murdered behind closed doors, it caused quite a commotion on their floor. Her explanation seemed implausible. The doorman informed the police that Krista did not live in the building. They knew each other because the victim frequently visited Gerda's apartment. The murder had occurred nearby. After investigating a few blocks away, the police went to Krista's house, which appeared to be quite empty. Meanwhile, Gerda was taken to the police station for questioning while the authorities carefully examined the crime scene. Under the doorknob of Gerda's apartment, the police discovered a bloody handprint, indicating that Krista had tried to call for help. The building's doorman recalled that when he heard a woman scream, he quickly ran up the stairs. On his way, he encountered a strange man coming down who seemed startled to see him. At first, the doorman did not pay much attention to the strange man. However, he later suspected that there was a connection between this man and the case. When the doorman arrived at the scene, several residents from nearby apartments had gathered. They found Krista lying in a large pool of blood, her breathing irregular and her condition deteriorating. The witnesses were all in a state of panic and did not know how to help. Gerda, who was present at the police station, was willing to share any information she had about her friend Krista. She seemed genuinely concerned about the attack and did not understand why anyone would want to harm Krista. They had been friends for a long time, supporting each other in their modeling and acting careers. Gerda said that Krista was supposed to arrive at around 3 p.m., but she had been feeling unwell that day and had taken sleeping pills, which caused her to miss the attack. Although Gerda spoke about her sleep problems, she could not remember the name of the pills she had taken or explain why she had not canceled her meeting with Krista despite having gone to bed. The police found Gerda's story suspicious. Krista had suffered serious injuries, including 7 stab wounds, 3 of which were in the chest. The attacker had used a large knife to assault Krista, leaving her unable to be saved. In addition, Krista had several defensive wounds on her arms. The forensic expert observed that all of the wounds appeared to have been inflicted from above, indicating that the attacker was tall. In interviews with witnesses, it was confirmed that a man, described as unknown, had fled the scene shortly before the police arrived. Several people, including the concierge, reported seeing a tall man in a blue jacket leaving the building shortly after the attack. Using the descriptions of the witnesses, a composite sketch was created and subsequently published in newspapers and broadcast on television. The police reconstructed the timeline of events, determining that Krista left her apartment at approximately 2 p.m. and planned to return at 5 p.m. Before the appointment, she had visited a friend. About 30 minutes later, she arrived at Gerda's house, took the elevator to the 4th floor, and was attacked on the stairs. It is believed that the attacker knew Krista and was waiting for her. Police initially suspected her friend Gerda because of her strange behavior during the attack. A neighbor reported that she had called Gerda's apartment and heard someone moving around behind the door, but no one answered, perhaps out of fear. The police suspected that Gerda was withholding information. Gerda insisted that no one rang the doorbell until the police arrived and claimed that she had heard nothing until the police knocked. Krista's murder in broad daylight in central Rome caused a media frenzy. The police hoped to gather useful information from the public, but the widespread attention also led to rumors spreading rapidly. The police received dozens of statements, most of which were complex, while others simply restated what was already known. They investigated all known criminals with a history of knife attacks, focusing not only on those who might be hiding in Rome, but also checking neighboring cities, although this effort was fruitless. In the midst of these events, a wave of panic spread throughout the community. People became increasingly afraid to go out, and the police station was flooded with angry calls from locals urging them to arrest the person responsible for Krista's attack. Some callers even made threats to the police, demanding action to ensure the safety of the streets. Meanwhile, Gerda maintained her innocence, calling the police's suspicion of her an insult. The police began to explore other leads, focusing especially on those close to Krista. There were many indications that the perpetrator was connected to Krista, leading the police to believe that the attack may have been motivated by jealousy or personal animosity. Therefore, they looked into the relationships Krista had formed since moving to another country. One notable individual was Krista's boyfriend. He was very jealous and possessive, with evidence suggesting that he had abused Krista on several occasions. Their relationship was tumultuous, often triggered by his unfounded suspicions that Krista was cheating on him with other men. This jealousy may have stemmed from several factors, including Krista's notebook filled with the phone numbers of men in the modeling and acting industries. Her profession required her to socialize and network with many people, and Krista frequently attended social events to promote herself and build valuable relationships, which made her boyfriend feel uncomfortable. He became jealous of every random person she interacted with, and his insecurities led him to become increasingly controlling. Every phone call from a man was viewed as a betrayal, which angered her boyfriend. This pressure caused Krista to decline movie offers and made her financially dependent on him. The police identified two suspects: Krista's boyfriend, who had both a motive and a violent streak, and her friend Gerda Hodap, who was near the scene of the murder but claimed not to have seen or heard anything. It is possible that Gerda had a motive for the murder, perhaps wanting to eliminate an attractive rival. However, there is no evidence to support this theory. Journalists constantly intervened, probing for information and asking difficult questions. The police were puzzled by the presence of a strange man in a blue jacket. Although this man appeared at the crime scene and quickly left, he coldly mentioned that there was a woman screaming on the 4th floor, without offering any help. Other witnesses grew suspicious and tried to explain the presence of this stranger. The police concluded that the case might have been carefully planned, with the man in the blue jacket acting as a distraction. However, if that were the case, the criminal would have likely stayed at the crime scene, which raised suspicions about Gerda. Meanwhile, Gerda faced constant interrogations and became a media phenomenon. Journalists pursued her, spreading rumors and portraying her as a monster. The police believed that if Gerda was not involved in the murder, she may have acted as an informant or concealed information. However, to date, there has been no concrete evidence linking her to the case. The police continue to investigate the possibility of a random attack. However, they face a shortage of resources. A search of Krista's inner circle yielded no leads. Her address book contained many phone numbers related to men and various clubs in Rome, as well as organizations connected to modeling and acting. Hundreds of contacts had accumulated over the years. Despite a thorough police investigation, each contact led to a dead end. Gerda remained under close police surveillance. They even took her to the morgue to view Krista's body and observe her reaction. The police noted her emotionless response to their questions. The interrogations were repeated several times. Gerda changed her story, claiming that the doorbell rang when Krista visited. However, the screams that followed frightened her, so she did not open the door. Gerda explained her dishonesty by saying that she felt ashamed for not helping her friend. The police believed that she was a potential accomplice to the crime, suggesting that Krista had been lured there so that her attacker could kill her. Ultimately, the police were unable to obtain a confession that would identify Gerda as the killer, and at most, she could be considered an accomplice. By reconstructing the timeline of events, the police discovered why the janitor had not noticed a strange man entering the building. He had visited the utility room several times during the day. It was a complete coincidence that he had entered just before Krista arrived at the apartment complex. This raised suspicions that the attacker knew exactly when and where Krista would arrive. Several witnesses reported seeing Krista enter the apartment complex alone, unescorted, and without anyone else accompanying her. This led the police to believe that the perpetrator had entered the apartment complex before Krista, just before she arrived. It was suspected that the perpetrator knew which floor she would go to and where to wait for her. After a while, the Krista Waninger murder case yielded no more clues. Public interest in the case also waned, as no similar attacks occurred afterward. People began to calm down, and Krista's case gradually faded into oblivion, largely because her family lived far away in another country. Despite efforts to understand the situation, it was difficult to generate significant interest in the case. Krista's mother and sister actively distributed flyers with her picture in the hope of attracting potential witnesses, but their efforts did not advance the investigation. The investigation into Krista's murder had stalled for 10 months until an anonymous witness contacted a local newspaper. Using a false name, he asked to speak to the editor. The man claimed to be the brother of Krista's killer and offered to sell information to the newspaper for a large sum of money. The journalist who took the call felt that the man's story was more than just a scam to capitalize on the tragedy. Believing that the witness might have accurate information, he decided to contact the police. The journalist carefully communicated with the man, promising to collect the necessary funds to pay him in advance by the evening. They agreed to contact him later to discuss the details. After the call, the journalist went to the police station to report the unusual conversation. The police showed interest in the case, and the journalist agreed to work with them, using special equipment to monitor the incoming call. The anonymous caller contacted the journalist at 19:05. During this call, 2 police officers listened in and recorded the conversation. They were able to locate the source of the call. Several police officers then went to the address provided, where they found a 32-year-old man using the phone booth. His name was Guido Pieri. When they saw him, the police immediately recognized that he matched the police sketch of the suspect. He was arrested and searched, and their suspicions were confirmed when they found a 30-centimeter-long knife in his jacket pocket, similar to the weapon used in the attack on Krista. The police believed they had the right suspect. Unfortunately, further examination revealed that Krista was not killed with this knife. Guido Pieri insisted from the beginning that he was only trying to profit from the story, but he was unable to provide any clear information. When the police searched his home, they found another knife, but no blood, and it could not be linked to Krista's wounds. Disturbing notes were found in Guido's home, including 5 notebooks detailing gruesome murders of women. The most alarming was the final story, which was very similar to the case of Krista Waninger. The story included specific details that had not been made public and were known only to the perpetrator, raising suspicions against Guido. Guido Pieri grew up in a family with 4 brothers and 3 sisters. From an early age, he had a strong passion for adventure painting. However, while in vocational school, he decided to drop out and start working, especially after struggling to finish 8th grade 3 times. Although he was not unintelligent, he had obvious problems with self-control. By the age of 18, he was employed as a mechanic in a construction company, maintaining a fleet of equipment. After 10 years, Guido married a much older woman. During this time, he pursued his passion for painting, dreaming of becoming an artist. In February, Guido moved to Paris to pursue this dream, but unfortunately, his efforts ended in disappointment. In his diary, He explained his feelings in detail. It was clear that Guido was a deeply creative individual with a unique perspective on life, but he struggled to manage the challenges he faced and find his own path. He lacked the courage and motivation needed to overcome these obstacles. As a result, Guido moved back to Rome, ended his marriage, and took a job as a secretary at the Institute, where he worked until he was 63. His diaries reveal a disillusioned man full of ambitions and ideas that he was unable to turn into reality. When the police questioned him about the notes they discovered during the search, Guido explained that they were ideas for a future novel, as he longed to write a book. When reviewing the notes, the police noticed many similarities to the real-life case of Christa Wanninger. Details of the crime scene and descriptions of the people involved closely resembled the apartment building and surrounding area where Christa was murdered. This raised questions about whether these accounts referred to her murder, which aroused suspicions among the police. Guido led a seemingly normal life, frequenting upscale restaurants and bars. However, he remained on the police radar, having been spotted at several other violent crime scenes unrelated to Christa. Unfortunately, he did not confess or provide any evidence of his innocence. At that time, witnesses who had seen a suspicious man in a blue jacket leaving the apartment building after hearing Christa scream had not yet testified. 3 of the 4 witnesses identified him as Guido. Despite ongoing questioning and suspicion, no physical evidence was found linking him to the crime. The police decided to return all the confiscated diaries belonging to Guido, and he was released. During this time, Christa's sister pushed for the investigation to be reopened. The police reviewed all relevant information, but this lead did not yield any results. Guido remained the prime suspect, but he did not confess. Despite having no evidence to present, the police continued to investigate and put pressure on him. Surprisingly, Guido Pieri went to the police station and confessed to killing Christa Wanninger. He was arrested, and it took a year before the trial began. Despite his confession, he was acquitted due to a lack of sufficient evidence. His lawyer argued that Guido had mental health problems and pointed out that he refused to confess again. By this time, he had been officially diagnosed with schizophrenia, which led the police to consider his confession unreliable. There were 2 more hearings. In both trials, Guido Pieri was found guilty, but he was released on bail due to his mental condition. Guido later changed his story, claiming that he had been at the scene of the murder by accident and denied any guilt. In addition, Guido destroyed his own notebooks, containing disturbing notes that could have been used against him. During the psychiatric evaluation, he was found to be insane. Therefore, the court could only order Guido to undergo treatment for schizophrenia. Despite his crime, he was allowed to go free without any apparent motive. For a long time, he was considered a threat to society, but there was not enough evidence to prove it. He was eventually released and deemed harmless, much to the shock of Christa's family. Sadly, Christa's relatives were never able to obtain justice or see Guido incarcerated,